Nope, the coffee's still too hot. How are you guys doing? Gonna jump in and do a little stream today. I know. I've got to move things over. Sorry, I adjusted the camera a little bit, and in doing so, I don't know if you're familiar with the nightmarish alternate universe that you can wake up into where everything is 2 inches to the left. It feels like that. Everything's just slightly off and not quite where it needs to be. That's what the situation we're in right now. Hey, how are you guys doing? Welcome to the stream. We're doing it again. So yeah, we're gonna hop in. We got a few things on the docket today. Talk about I got three little topics. We'll hop in, talk about them. Not too much going on myself. A very long week, I'll say that. Very, very, very busy. At my full-time day job. Got bosses leaving. Last day was on Friday, and unfortunately, they've been quite the mess in their wake. Not in a derogatory sense, just in a like really. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Not really an opportune time for somebody to step away, especially a person who's sort of like neck deep and all that stuff. But that's the situation. So let me know if how the audio sounds. I think it should be okay. I just want to make sure. Oh no, it changed. That's all right. We'll do our best. We'll do it. It's just a little bit, just a little bit. There we go. So then I'll probably move it back. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this arrangement. I may move stuff back next stream. I think I'm getting the feeling I might. I didn't know it was going to be quite this uncomfortable. This puts me kind of closer to the center of my desk, which is a little bit weird, I guess, to think of, but it's me a little closer to the center of the desk. But it does mean I have two monitors, so everything's a little offset now, so everything feels a little weird. But yeah, no, let's. I guess without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it. Let's go ahead and get moving on it. So today, first thing that we are going to jump into, and this is something I've kind of been chewing the cud on for a little bit, and that is making some potential changes or doing some homebrew options for the help action. And you might be going, oh, well, why do we need changes to the help action? This is a situation where I think it's very interesting that a lot of people really dislike guidance to the point that we had to change how guidance operates in the 2024 mix-up, whatever you want to call it. Not really an edition change, half edition change. It truly is a 5.5, whatever you want to call it, where they changed a number of spells in small ways, a lot of things in very small ways to kind of make it really, really muddy the waters between the 5e and 2024 editions, where it's very easy to think that you're playing with one set of rules and find out that you're kind of got this hodgepodge of what 5e and 2024 kind of running, which, to my experience, is kind of what every game's kind of been like at the same time. Kind of taking the best from both editions, or what people think are the best from both editions. So we've changed guidance in 2024 to be like, instead of it just being a blanket plus 1d4 for a minute that you can hold on to and use, I think it would be like, no, you have to be very specific about what the guidance is to be used for within the next minute, which really kind of tamps down that sort of blatant, like, every moment the person who has guidance is like always throwing out guidance. So I guess they thought it was spamming. I think a lot of people find it as like spamming and like game breaking. And I'm like, it effectively gives you an extra 2 to 3 on a check, which is not game breaking in 5e for sure. It definitely makes things a lot easier, and so it's definitely a useful spell when you maybe don't have that person who's in your party who's trained in survival or animal handling or whatever it is. It kind of gives you that boost to essentially be like, what if somebody in our party did have that proficiency, at least at low levels. So I don't find it particularly troublesome. I haven't in the I guess we're on 11 years that this system has basically been out. I've never really had any problems with it. And I think it's interesting that people have gotten upset about it when you juxtapose it next to the help action, which the help action is an action that anybody can take. You do not need to be trained in whatever the person is trying to do, the original person is trying to do, and it immediately gives you advantage, which is effectively math boiling it down, kind of equivalent to a +5 on the roll, which is significantly more than guidance and can be used on any sort of thing any number of times. The only thing that's different is that it takes another person's turn, but usually this is an out of combat thing when you're using the help action, so rounds and action economy aren't nearly as important most of the time. So I find that very interesting. And it is one of the things that I dislike about help action, is that you can throw the help action on literally anything. So when you get into the train, the buff train, the 5e 2024 skill proficiency buff train, which is essentially you've got the person, they get the help action, they get guidance, and then they usually get like a bardic inspiration thrown on top of that. And so now you're rolling 3 dice, well, technically 4 dice with advantage. So that significantly boosts your check. So you're talking about a plus, let's say, so you get advantage, so that's a +5. You get guidance, which is essentially a +2.5. And then a bardic inspiration starts out at a d6, right? So a 3.5. So 6 plus 5, so a +11 to a roll. Now that is a problem in D&D 5e in 2024 with its flat math. Being able to do that is really, really powerful. Makes it very, very difficult to fail ability checks in certain circumstances. When you guys have the option for everybody to pull the resources, which is great. I think that's actually a strength of it. Gives you this opportunity that when you pull it out at very specific times where you're like, we cannot fail this check. We have to make this check. Everybody piles onto the one person who can do it. And I think that works out really well. The problem is that then once they figure out that's the optimized way to play, there are a certain subset of players and groups that will just dogpile every single roll they can. Especially with resources like help and guidance that aren't finite, because guidance is a cantrip, and the help action just takes an action, and you can do it every single turn. And all your friends could do it if, for some reason, one person's unable to do it. As opposed to something like a bardic inspiration where you only have a certain number of per rest. So you have a limited resource there. On help actions and guidance, you don't. And so that was always sort of the trouble with guidance. So rather than making it a leveled spell, which I don't think would have been a right choice to do, they decided to make it very specific, like, oh, you have to tell them specifically what check they're going to be using it for. And I was like, okay, but it's very interesting that only, in my estimation, only targets people who are just blanket guidancing, who's like, every minute that we're walking, I'm always casting guidance, so you can always assume whoever's in the front of the party or whoever it is, you always have guidance cast on you when I'm around you. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel like that's a DM thing that I didn't really need to do with the roll, and be like, you are not just blanket casting. If you're blanket casting guidance, you basically have disadvantage on doing any other checks because you're constantly casting spells, and that's all you're focusing on your power on. So that means you have disadvantage on your passive perceptions, so you reduce that by 5. You're not able to make checks in other ways. You're going to have disadvantage on things like dexterity saving throws, like if a trap goes off, because you're very much like head down, busy, focused on doing spells, and you're not paying attention to your environment and do stuff like that. So I feel like that would be much easier to get around rather than changing the spell that is helpful and very popular, and in and of itself is not particularly game breaking. So I found like the change they made was very interesting. Which is why, for at least the games that I'm running in, and often the games I'm playing in, if I can ask about it with the DM and be like, can I just take the old guidance, the one that just allows it, where I don't have to specify what it is, because maybe I specify acrobatics, and then we learn climbing up the tree is athletics, and you go, okay, well, I guess I just recast guidance on you? Because I feel like usually when most people cast guidance, they're in the situation, and they know they're about to make a check, and then the person's like, I cast guidance on you. Like, I think that is 90% of the situations at play. That is generally how people play. That has been my experience, and that is what I've witnessed online, offline, cross plays. There are very few groups and players who really go out of their way to really just spam it constantly. And again, that what you're doing by changing it that way didn't really, I feel like, accomplish most of what you're trying to do. So that's not great. So let's talk about an alternative. So, for an alternative, what I was thinking of, and this is somewhat based off of something that already exists in D&D and Pathfinder too. Specifically, it's kind of the skill things that you get as you start to level up. Specifically, what comes to my mind is Rogue, because Rogue is the class that is, I feel like, is mostly defined by this. So there are other classes that have the same thing, and that's the idea of you place a floor on the roll. Like, you cannot roll any lower than this. Like, there are rogues who have things like, I think the Thief subclass, which is not by any means a popular one. Whenever you do a sleight of hand, once you get to a certain level, I think maybe it's 5 or 7, you're like, oh, anytime that you roll under a 10 when you're trying to make a sleight of hand check, you just take a 10 on it. And so trying to do that, but doing that with the help action instead. Either changing it one of two ways. The first and easy change that I've made myself, and that I think I've seen a lot of other people make, is like, if you're going to give the help action, you also need to have proficiency in the thing you're trying to help out. You need to be able to. This needs to be a person who can help by bringing additional, like, they have expertise in it, not expertise mechanically, but knowledge and experience in the subject that they're bringing to bear, rather than just being like a helper who's just there and like, I'm helping. So instead, having somebody who's like, oh, I have insight into what we're doing, so I know specifically what you're trying to do and how to potentially help you. And the other way is, like I said, kind of rolling a floor, and that's one of the things that I want to check in. Oh, hey, Shaza. Have a giant block of evil sentient cheese when the variable stat block falls from the clouds when players start cheesing their checks. Yeah, as the DM, I have many tools within my toolbox with which to punish players who are being silly. If you want to be silly in the campaign will be silly back at you. Like, you drop the cheese on them. So for this thing, I'm thinking specifically about rolling that. So the helper, when they roll, they make the same check, and whatever they roll, the original person, the person who's actually performing the action, cannot roll lower than that. So maybe that's easier. Maybe it'll be easier to show an example. Let me swap this over. Let me pull up the dice, and then we'll swap over and we'll just take a look at it real quick. It'll be like, we'll do 3d6. How about that? It'll give us our DC. Let's go ahead and swap over. Pow! There we go. Okay, perfect. So, my dog was in here. He just walked away. So we're going to set up this DC. So if you haven't seen me do the 3d6 DC before, you can check it out. It's not what you think. We don't add up all the numbers. It's slightly different. If you go look at I have a video that's like my favorite 2d6 tables. This is in there, even though it's technically a 3d6. And it is a table, but I've got it memorized, so I don't need the table because I use it so often. So 4 and 5, that's 9, so that'll be 10. So this is a DC 11. I know, that didn't make sense. This adds up to 10, not 11. No, don't think about it too hard. If you're really interested, go watch that video. Right? Or sit down and just explain it. So that's our DC. So let's say that we were going to do... I'm thinking about it because it's in my mind, because we were just doing it in our session yesterday, and we'll say it's an athletics check. Okay, so this person wants to help with the athletics check. Because maybe this one person's not really great at athletics checks, and they gotta jump across this ravine. That's what they were doing in the session I was running. Trying to jump across a ravine. And I like making a check as opposed to, because there's a consequence of it, rather than just they fall. The dog just booped me and then walked away. Hi. Are you trying to make yourself known? No, he's just being crazy. We're going to ignore him while he's being insane. So we're making the athletics check. We're going across. Let's say that... So the first person who's got the athletics check, maybe, as is the case, right, we have the wizard in the party or somebody else who definitely has dump strength. So they have a 8. So they're going to be rolling a d20. They're not trained athletics. They have a -1. So we're like, okay, so somebody here... The barbarian's like, I'm going to help you jump this ravine. here's how to place your feet. I'm going to run with you and kind of like give you a boost to try to help you get over there, or whatever it is, or use maybe they jump across first and they hold out a hand and try to help them get across. However, narratively you want to make that make sense. They're gonna roll for it. All right, so the barbarian probably has pretty good. We're gonna say that they've got at least a +4 in their strength. They're probably trained in athletics. We'll say it's low level, so that's another +2. So they have a d20 +6. So 16 for them. They've got no problem. Okay, but they've said our thing. So they rolled a 10 on the die as their health action. So now we know that the wizard can't roll any lower than a 10. Now, we know that won't help us with this DC in this particular circumstance. But our wizard gets a stroke of luck, the barbarian helps out a lot, and they make the jump. And it's just slightly different, and I want it to be a little bit more thoughtful as to who can give the action and who can do it. Now, in that example, I would pick somebody who was trained in athletics, but with this system, you wouldn't have to do it. So let's say instead, two wizards are helping each other across the ravine. We'll keep the same DC, it's DC 11. So and they're each going to help each other. So the first wizard's going to make their jump, so our helper's going to roll a d20 minus their 1, so 18. So here's the cool thing, is with the system, that PC's guaranteed to make it. They can't roll any lower than a 19. So they're automatically across, which is great. See, they would have rolled an 8, which would not have worked. Now, that first one's across, and they've set up their rope or whatever it is and thrown it back and trying to get them the help action that way, and anchoring it. And so they're going to roll their help action. Okay, their help action, not so helpful. They're kind of doing it on their own. So that 2 is not going to be helpful. They can't roll a natural 1. Not that technically is supposed to matter in skill checks, but I think we all fudge that a little bit, where we make rolling a natural 1 just a little bit worse than normal. And so, not going to be helpful here, but it does protect them from potentially a natural 1. 6. All right, well, hey, the dice are what the dice are. If you rolled this just normally, if they were just rolling it with advantage anyways, this wouldn't have been any better. It's the same, yet slightly different, I think, in a more meaningful way. This is something that I'm interested in maybe playing around with. I need to find a one-shot or something, because I don't necessarily want to immediately introduce this into my campaign and be like, oh, this is how we're going to do help from now on. Like, I want to test it out a little bit more. But it isn't an idea that I have in my head. So it's not super mechanically different, but it is a little bit, I find, different in a somewhat meaningful way. I think it gives help a little bit more narrative weight. Like, the mechanics feel a little bit closer aligned to the fiction, that big ludonarrative resonance, because it's not dissonance. Ludonarrative resonance, where the rules of the game, the mechanics of the game, reflect what we're trying to do within the fiction or narrative of the game. This person's trying to help you, so they're ensuring that you, with their aid, you cannot roll any lower than this. But at the same time, some people just aren't super great at helping them, and sometimes they roll a 2, and they're like, well, I can keep you from catastrophically failing, but I'm not going to be particularly helpful in you doing the thing that you're trying to do. If you're playing with natural 1s on the skill checks, to be like, oh, well, something really bad's going to happen. So yeah, that was sort of my thoughts on changing up the help action a little bit. I'd say try it out, see what you think. If you do try it out, and make sure and leave me a comment later on, at the bottom under this stream, and so I can take a look at it. I'm hoping that I'll have an opportunity to run a one-shot at some point and try to feel how it feels out. It's something that's got a lot of maybe more exploration-focused one-shot, so I can have a lot of help actions, do a lot of skill checks, kind of things, a lot of proficiency checks, which will give me a good gauge as to how it plays. But I think it could be fun. I think it, like I said, it brings the mechanics a little closer to the fiction of the narrative, which I'm very interested in doing. I think we all really, really like it when the rules of the game reflect the fiction that we're all trying to create together when we're playing the game. That playing roles aspect of the game. That's that. Next thing that we were going to talk about. What were we going to talk about? Oh, exiting a PC. So we'll just throw it back to me real quick. Don't need to look at that. So, unfortunately, and this does happen on occasion, where you have to exit a player and their character from an ongoing campaign. That is something that I had to do yesterday. So we have not because we're booting the player because they're awful. No, we love our player. We wish that they would be continuing with us, but at least for now, their work schedule has changed and they're not able to sort of meet on that same game day. So there's potential that we might move the game a little bit. We might do that. We're not sure. We might move the day of the game. And I think, unfortunately, I'm the only one who particularly has an issue with that, scheduling-wise. And the worst part is that I'm running the game, so that won't work. So I need to sit down and really crunch the numbers on calendar dates and see if maybe that's a viable solution, maybe not. Maybe it's something we test to see what else. But for the moment, we were like, okay, it's changing now, so we know for sure that they're not going to be here next week and foreseeable future until they maybe get their schedule changed again or something else changes. So they are just we're just kind of stuck right now. So we're down to 3 PCs, 3 players, 1 DM. So let's talk about exiting it. So I knew that this was coming up, and we talked about it a little bit at the end of our last session, where we discussed, okay, what are the things that we need to do that? So we knew that we needed to exit this PC. And what that was going to look like, how they're going to walk their way out of the campaign. I wanted to give them a nice sort of like flourish, a nice little going away present for the player. Trying to do that, trying to make it special, trying to make it a little bit memorable, at least for everybody there, or at least enjoyable. To lose one of your players, which is, a tall task. It's not super fun, but that's what we're trying to do. So I kicked it around a little bit. Like I said, I was very busy this week, so I didn't get a chance to prep until literally the night before, which is okay, but I prefer to prep kind of earlier in the week, so that way I have some time to chew on it and think about it. Think about my plans and kind of refine some stuff. Didn't have a chance to do that this week. That's okay, though. I was just too wiped from the craziness that is my work and other aspects of my life to make that happen this week. So I knew that I wanted to make it, so I was kind of kicking it around the idea. Earlier in the week, I reached out to the player and be like, hey, do you have any specific ideas about anything that you specifically want to happen, with you kind of leaving it out? And not particularly. We had some stuff going on. We have the sort of backstory elements that are going on with this character. So I knew it was like, okay, well, we can definitely play into some of that. They're researching it, that they've just had some of that stuff kind of kick off. So I was like, all right, well, we can do some of that stuff. And kick it off and make that happen. And I could change some things with it. They also had something that just came up very recently. So I was like, that could also work. But they were very open as to sort of like kind of giving me free rein to kind of do whatever I want as far as exiting them, which is both, it's nice, but sometimes it's not as helpful. Sometimes the blank page is very, very difficult to work off of. So I was like, all right, I'm in a very interesting place in the campaign. We're about to go into a festival sort of episode, probably 2 to 3 sessions of a festival, depending on how quickly they go through things and what happens there. So I know that they're about to go into a festival, so it's still kind of been some downtime going into a festival, so they're kind of in between adventures. So it's a good place to do it, but it's also weird because things are about to kick off into a totally different thing, and I don't want to get that character involved in something and have them start to be important in that, accidentally important in that, just to have them exit. So it's like, what am I going to do? And I was like, all right, I guess maybe I can run a one-shot. That's the solution I came to. It's like, I'm going to run some sort of side quest guiding one-shot that they'll run on. They really only have the night before the festival, so it's like, it's got to be this night, and it's going to be this afternoon, because that's where they're starting. They're starting on the afternoon, the last down day before the festival. So it's like, I only have a limited amount of time for them to be able to do this. So I've got to make it quick, which is good for a one-shot. It's got to be snappy. It's got to be self-contained. All the things that say, hey, run a one-shot, essentially. I'm like, okay, so I need something that I can pick up and run very quickly. We'll get through it. We'll come back, and that'll be the end of it. And we'll wrap it up that way. Which means I can also make a one-shot that's pretty much just focused around this character, which I didn't do, but I could have. Because I also didn't want them to get drawn into a lot of focus on this character and then feel bad about that character then not being in the campaign and not being able to play any further after that. So it's a very sort of delicate line of some different things that I'm trying to balance. And as a trapeze artist on the high wire walker, right? Anyways, the balancing act, not a trapeze artist. Totally different thing. Totally different circus performer. So trying to do this high wire act, balancing act between these different things. So it's like, okay, so I'm gonna run a one shot. I'm getting down to like, oh, I don't have that much time to prep. I only have this evening to prep, and I don't have a lot of time because I was like, I gotta go to bed and I gotta, do other stuff. Unfortunately, as much as I would like to stop the clock and do my D&D prep and spend a bunch of time doing it, that is not usually something we can do as Dungeon Masters and Game Masters. Usually you're kind of under the gun. You're usually on the time crunch trying to come up with that stuff. I was definitely within that. Now, luckily, it wasn't like this is 30 minutes before the game and I haven't done anything. This is the evening before, and I feel like I got a little bit of time, but I've got to make it quick. I can't spend a lot of time doing this. So at first I was like, all right, so I'm going to do a one shot. I don't have a ton of time, so in that circumstance, as I usually say, it's like I'm just going to go find a one shot. So I looked at some of my one shot resources that I have, as well as some that were highly rated online, kind of looked at a different one, and I kind of landed on one, which was, let me pull it up in the one. Which is this guy. Well, this is yeah, that's fine. 30 minutes before the game and I haven't done anything. Yeah, you and so many DMs. I know that I'm oftentimes the weird anomaly person who's like, no, I prep early and often. I know, I'm the weirdo. The way that you run is very much more like everybody else. I'm the weirdo here. So I'm gonna hop over so that way you guys can look at it. So this is the one that I was looking at. This is a little adventure called A Wild Sheep Chase. I was looking for a second level adventure, so I just kind of did a search and was like, because I looked through some of my stuff and I was like, nothing here kind of jumps out at me as being like, oh, I could do these, but they weren't really sort of like sparking my inspiration. Then I was like, okay, here are a handful of different ones that are pretty highly rated that people say are really good for a second level party. Hey, I've got a second level party of 4 characters, and it's a single session. So this one, a lot of people pointed to, but this is actually for 5th character. And so I thought it was weird, like people were like, oh, it's for second level characters. So like, this is definitely not for second level characters. Unless there's another version of it that is. This one. And so this is by, who is this by? Winghorn Press. And that's the website I'm on, if you're wondering. So I'll read it just because it's probably a little difficult for you guys to read. A single session adventure for parties of 4th and 5th level, the very first adventure produced by Winghorn Press, freshly updated with player feedback and suggestions, as well as a brand new map. When the parties attempt to grab a rare afternoon of downtime, so already I'm like, oh, yeah, there we go, are interrupted by a frantic sheep equipped with a scroll of speak to animals. And I was like, okay, well, they're in a town, so it's not that they couldn't come across the sheep. It's a little weird for them to come across it in the middle of the town. They're dragged into a magical grudge match that will test their strength, courage, and willingness to endure bad puns. Will our heroes be able to overcome a band of transmuted assassins and an extremely bitter apprentice packing dangerously unstable magic items? There's only one way to find out. And as I got into this and looked at it a little bit more, I was like, okay, this is doing some stuff that I don't necessarily want to introduce into my campaign. And because it's a campaign in the campaign world, I was like, it's got to be in the world. I'm not going to be like, and we're running a totally unrelated one-shot. I'm going to put it in the world, so that way it still feels natural for all these characters to be on this adventure. My game world is also relatively low magic, not super low magic, but they don't have a lot of magic items. Let's put it that way. Even though we've been playing a while. So I was like, I'm not sure that I want to go through handling them, getting their hands on a bunch of magic items, and then there's the I'm gonna have to explain the assassins part, and then we've got like the magic apprentice. I'm like, there's not a mage in this town, so now I got to come up with a mage character and figure out how they're gonna be around. It's like I could do there. People could be traveling here for the festival. It's not like I couldn't have made this work. Spoiler alert, I didn't use this, but this is the thing that sort of kicked off everything. I was like, I could use this, but I feel like I'm going to have to do quite a bit of work in addition to just reading it because of the situation that I'm in the campaign. So I was like, I could, and it'll be zany and fun, and I'm not sure if zany and fun is also the right tone that I'm particularly looking for this adventure, because we have an adventure where somebody's exiting. Like, I wanted people to have fun, obviously, but I'm like, there's also some more serious notes and undertones of things that are going on, specifically with this player character and the campaign as a whole, where this lighthearted thing maybe doesn't quite fit the tone quite right. But essentially what I got from it was the name, the Wild Sheep Chase. I was like, okay, so chasing a wild animal, or chasing down an animal, I was like, that sounds like fun. That's the thing that drew it to me, was the name. I was like, oh yeah, something kind of lighthearted, but not super lighthearted. Also, very simple is what it is. Right? Go get those sheep. And that's what I thought it was before I opened it up and started reading the synopsis. It's like, oh, it's not quite what I thought it was. So, I thought there, and I was like, okay, I've looked through some of my stuff. I've looked through some stuff online, and nothing's really kind of hitting the bullseye for me. So in that case, it's like, I guess I'll just make one myself. I don't have a lot of time, so it's got to be quick. So it's not a fully, like, super fleshed out thing with a whole bunch of maps. So it's like, I can make a one-shot. Like, that's not too bad. So I did make a one-shot in about 2.5 hours. Probably a little bit less. There's some of that stuff where I do very specific things that I don't think the average Dungeon Master or Game Master would probably do. Where I do a little bit extra. So if you were doing this sort of thing, you might be able to do this within an hour, depending on how much detail you add to things and how much stuff you need to look up. I need to look up some stuff for my world, trying to figure out, because I was like, I need to include this NPC, and I don't remember their name. I know they exist, so I had to go back through my old notes from, like, they talked to this person in, like, session 4, I think. And I'm like, alright, so that was 15 sessions ago? Alright, let me go check. So I had to go pick them up as this sort of standoff in NPC, and it was actually a nice part of the adventure I ended up running, where there was a lot of sort of callbacks to stuff that they had come across previously or had dealt with previously, and so they got to meet an NPC they had met before. They went to a place they had an opportunity to go to before, but had not gone to before, and an old problem resurfaced in a very specific way. So let's jump over and let's take a look at what I actually did do. Is I made this little adventure called Clovis on the Run. Instead of Wild Sheep Change, is Clovis on the Run, and I was listening to because strangely, I don't know why they made a music video for this song 45 years after it came out, but what's the name? Is it just called On the Run? The Christopher Cross song. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting sidetracked, but it is going to bug me if I don't. If I can type, this is weird. I'm trying to type this way because the monitors are all out of whack. I'm gonna have to move back. I can't do this. I won't be able to do this. No, sorry. It's called Ride Like the Wind. So that had popped up on as a recommended thing, and I was listening to YouTube music. That's usually one of the things I do, is I listen to music on YouTube while I'm doing, Dungeon Master prep stuff. Usually I'm listening to like Dungeon Sims or something like that. It's something that's very sort of it's atmospheric, something that's very sort of also background music kind of things. I usually don't listen to a lot of pop music or anything like that. But this dropped up, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'd seen the music video before. I was like, oh, I'll listen to it a little bit. And so I listened to it, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times as I was going through it, and then kind of hopped back and forth between some of the other sort of more ambient music I was listening to. I'm not going to pull it up because you don't need to look at it, but it's out there. It exists. Go check it out. I was more inclined to listen to things like this, which is something I'm listening to right now, I'll just pull it up just so we can look at it, which is Vandus Aquarius. So this is a Dungeon Synth Whale Synth album I'm listening to right now. I'll pull this out. We don't need that anymore. Put that back over there. I was going to have it on the stream, but it does have some licensed music in there. We're not going to do that, so that's going to be... Oh, which YouTube channel for Dungeons? I listened to a few different ones. That one specifically, I think, is the Dungeon Synth Archives, right? Yes. So I think that's probably one of the most popular ones for Dungeon Synth. As well as some of the other ones. I have my own sort of favorite artists within that. But I do like Vandus. I think this is maybe only the second time that I've listened to him. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good. Listen to more of this. Then it's got recommended down there Supernatural Darkness, which is a newcomer, kind of newish comer to the Dungeons scene. I really like their stuff. I'm really excited to see what they come up with next. We could have a whole discussion about that, but that's not what we're supposed to be here. We're supposed to be talking about D&D stuff, so we're going to do that instead. So, Clovis on the run. And I was like, all right, we're going to make a one-shot adventure. Easy. I've done this before. We've talked about this before. I do try to do sort of a pyramid method, and I know that kind of building up the 5-room dungeon. 5-room dungeon, so 5 scenes is pretty good. I a little bit more. I'd like to add a 6th scene. That's just a me thing. And then once I have 6 scenes, that gives me the ability to do that pyramid step. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is an outlining thing that I do sometimes when I'm making adventures, is that I decide, okay, I take the 3 pillars and I split them up. So 50% of one pillar, 33%, 1/3 of another pillar, and then 1/6 of the final pillar. So the way that I kind of structure it in my mind is be like, this adventure is primarily exploration with some combat and a little social, or RP, little social RP. And that gives me an idea of like, okay, these are the focuses that I want to have on the adventure. And so I think about the adventure just at a very base level and be like, okay, in this one I was like, oh, I actually want some more combat in there. So this is some combat. There's 2 combats that are in here. There is a social scene, and then there's a little bit of exploration. So let's hop down here. So I knew that I was going to be doing that. I was like, all right, so I knew I wanted an animal. I was like, okay, what do we want to do for animals? It's like, oh, we actually have an animal, like a very specific animal that the party has already met, and that's Clovis. Clovis is the pet capybara of Pearl, who is a courtesan, a well-to-do courtesan that the players have met on their way into town, and have kind of run afoul of. She put them up for a night in her townhouse, but then some members of the party went and did some shady things, and Pearl was like, I can't be associated with people who are doing this sort of stuff. I already have a very specific public persona that I need to maintain as a courtesan. So it's like, I cannot be around you guys. And so their steward kind of kicked them out. Like, okay, you can't be in here. You gotta find other lodgings. And they went back to apologize just very recently, in a recent session, and they basically kind of got told by the steward, hey, don't knock at our door until you fix your reputation problem. Because their reputation problem has not, at that point, had not gotten better, and in fact, gotten worse, with a wanted poster up for one of the player characters. Now that stuff's kind of been resolved, primarily resolved, I would say. And to Charles Ruggles, junior investigator, amateur sleuth, absolutely ruined. His humiliation, almost. And Charles Ruggles was so close to pinning him for it, and they just couldn't quite get across the line. He's kind of become this sort of buffoon investigator, who has gotten so close to the truth that it's very, very impressive, just through sheer tenacity and the players just being silly about the things that they do. They've really just gotten out by the skin of their teeth a few times from him. Anyways, Clovis is the pet capybara, and I was like, oh, I'll just have him be Cappy Nap. So somebody just took the capybara, they're going to ransom them back to Pearl. Super basic setup. We're going to have the animal in there, that's the thing. Everybody's going to be motivated to go after the animal because it's a cute, adorable little animal with a pink bow. And he's very nice. And they like Pearl, and they want to be in Pearl's good graces. Sounds like this is a great opportunity for Pearl to come to them and be like, hey, we can mend this relationship. And then they're able to tell her face to face without the steward getting in the way that, oh, well, we've fixed our reputation issue, so we should be good from here on out. So it's kind of a melding. So this is both stuff that is a one shot, but is also working back into the campaign in a very important way. So it now gives them access to that. So it's like, all right, that's perfect. And as far as the premise being like, oh, somebody who kidnaps somebody's pet and then ransoms them back, this was just a thing that used to happen a lot in ye olden times. Really more, I think, of a Victorian era thing, probably into the modern era. But it was a thing that people would do, especially like the Kinsey and orphan kind of characters, is that they would get together like a child gang, as is the way in Dickensian kind of folklore, and in the real world. So you have the street orphans, the street rats, and they would get together and they would run this racket where they would essentially kidnap rich people's dogs, and then when rich people are like, "Oh, my dog is lost, I'll offer a reward for the return of the dog," then they would just show up and return the dog for money. And so that was a racket that they would routinely run. So in this one, I wanted to be like, oh, I don't want them to get lost in the sauce and just be like, Clovis is lost, and then they're looking for Clovis instead of going after things. So I'm like, no, he has been fully taken, and they left a ransom note. Now the ransom note is to the tune of 500 gold pieces. 500 gold pieces, which Pearl assuredly does not have. She is not poor by any means, but filthy coinage and lucre is hard to get your hands on in this world for the most part. There's not a lot of liquid currency, as my players know all too well. When they're trying to buy health potions, they're like, "They're how much?" And I can't buy that. Which comes up later. It came up in the adventure to the tune of a little hee-hees, ha-has, somebody got a little disease kind of going on. So, Clovis kidnapped. Pearl comes to Den. Here's a gigantic ransom. They can't pay it. Pearl can't pay it. I need the help of adventurers. So there's a big to-do when she shows up at the Leviathan Temple, because I knew that there were going to be at least 2 PCs there, because my PCs are like cockroaches. When you turn the light on, they just scatter to all 4 corners. If I drop them into town, they will all run in different directions. So it's like, I know 2 people will be here. That at least gives me a scene that's not just one person. So I'm like, I'm going to have her enter there. So, enter there. In the afternoon, there's oohs and ahs. People know Pearl is the lady about town. And so she is a very sort of public figure. So people see her at there, and then she speaks to them in the back room. I need your help, adventurers. Clovis, the pet capybara, has been cappy-napped to the tune of 500 gold ransom. With instructions, come alone, meet the thieves at Medivh's Bell, which is the time that I made up, because, again, I need them to be back in the morning for the festival. So it's like they can't be out there all night. So I have a very small window of time that I'm trying to run this one shot in. So it's very time bound to ensure it doesn't interrupt other stuff that's kind of pre-existing stuff that's been going on in the campaign. So I know they've got to be back. So I just made up a time period, which is Medivh's Bell, which is roughly 9 p.m. at the tunnel southwest of Mandabagora, the Mangrove Moor. The old landing, which they have only learned about in passing before, that they learned while they were on the ferry coming to the island, is that they're going to a new ferry landing that's kind of building and growing out. It's kind of going through a little bit of an economic boom because of the ferry landing change. And they talked to somebody who was from the old landing. And they're like, oh, well, the ferry used to land at a different place, but they decided it was more economically viable in that area to dredge the swamp and marsh area around there, the mangrove area around there, and cut down trees. That lumber would be more economically viable than the ferry was at the cost of losing the ferry. It turns out that is not the case. We found out that place has basically become a ghost town. But such is life. People have good ideas, and they think they have good ideas, and it just doesn't work out for them. Kind of adds sort of that sort of human sort of aspect to the game too. Where it's like, hey, it's a tough life out there for just regular people, just trying to make ends meet. So she has the thing: come alone. We're going to meet the thieves at the Medivh's Bell at the tunnel This is southwest. It should be southeast. This is one of the things that I reminded them as they were going through it. It's like, you know of this place. You've never been there, but you've heard of Mandavagora. You know of the old ferry landing. You have heard about the tunnels only in passing. This is something I had to remind them. When you went to go see Gati Takisha, who is sort of like the Night Lord of the area, it's like when you were going to audience there, you remember somebody being escorted out who was talking about the tunnels being found and things coming out of the tunnels that have become unearthed because they dredged up this mangrove swamp. They're like, oh, there's tunnels underneath here. So things that have been discovered in the world that they've heard in passing, but they haven't investigated. This was one of those things where you throw out an adventure hook, and people are like, nope, not taking that. And my PCs were very head down, especially in the very beginning. They were like, we got to get to the place. And partly my fault, partly I think I gave them this unintentional idea that they needed to get to the town that has been sort of their home base for the beginning of the campaign very, very quickly for the festival. And it's like, no, you don't need to. You guys have plenty of time to get there. It's not very far away. You have many, many days to get there. But I think that they were like, we're going to get there. We're going to get established. We're going to do that stuff. And I think that was part of me not communicating super great as a DM. I think that there were things that I probably could, if I could go back in time, I would do slightly differently to be like, oh, you guys have plenty of time for sightseeing and picking up odd jobs and doing stuff like that. I would probably made that a little bit more pronounced while I was running the game. So they're going to a place they kind of know, they've heard of, but only in passing. They've never been to. There was a chance that they could have gone through this place earlier if they had taken the left fork in the road, but they took the right fork in the road. When they took the right fork in the road, they met Pearl. So Pearl's like, oh yeah, and like she knows of the place, but because she's certainly been on the old ferry before, when it was still at the old landing. But she doesn't know the tunnel. She doesn't know anything about that. She's a city girl. She doesn't spend a lot of time out in the countryside with that stuff. So, again, come alone, beat the thieves, medieval spell. You know where you're going, kind of. So the reward: ask what you will of me, and if I can, I'll grant it. So she can't pay the 500 gold ransom. We know that. We established that. So this is going to be 50 gold for the PC, which is roughly 200 gold for 4 PCs, which will become 3 after this one shot, because one of our PCs, like I said, is exiting. So they can either take the hard cash, and I kind of told them up front, you can ask for a cash reward, which will be 50 gold, or you can ask something. You can essentially have a favor from Pearl that you can hold in reserve that you can ask of her, something you can ask from her. That's roughly worth about 50 gold. Like, that's sort of what she's willing to pay. So, I mean, you can't be like, oh, can you get me in... I want an audience with... I need you to get me in the room with Baysada, who's like sort of the primary noble on the entire island. She might have the pool to make that happen, but I think that's definitely above what is essentially the cost of a health potion. It's like, I think that's a little above what you get. If you guys maybe all pulled your stuff together, maybe, if that was the one favor you were going to ask her together as a group, then she could potentially get you in the room. She might be willing to do that. So, she's got the reward. It's pretty vague. Gives them open to interpretation. Did the thing that I like to do, which is not necessarily be like, I'm just only going to give you gold. I prefer to do slightly more intangible rewards. Be like, I'm going to give you a favor. I am a person who has some amount of clout in the town, and I can help you do things or get access to things, and get in rooms with people, talk to people, help you accomplish things you otherwise don't have the social currency to be able to do in town. So she offers that as the reward. Because again, these are just bumpkin adventurers from who knows where. They're crazy and violent people. So not always the most popular people in the world, and not especially that the people in power necessarily want to meet with when they're powerful and violent, and they might just kill you if they're in the room with you. You don't know these people. These people are crazy. They go into dungeons. They fight monsters for money. Not even hired to do it. They do that in case there might be money in the dungeon. These people are criminally insane. They are full-on psychopaths. And the world does kind of treat them like that. Like, these people are really powerful, but they're also, like, real dangerous. They solve a lot of problems with one solution. Their hammer is violence. And so not everybody's super comfortable around that for obvious reasons. So, the last contention that she has is, oh, I'm gonna come along. I'm gonna be part of this. It's like, I won't send you to do what I would. Clovis needs me. I'll meet you at the hamlet along the East Road at sunset. So there's another hamlet that's in between. She needs to keep, like I said, she has sort of a public persona, so she needs to keep kind of a low profile. So she doesn't want to be seen leaving the city with them. So she's going to go ahead, and then they'll catch up with her. So she's going to go about an hour east down the East Road to another little sleepy hamlet, and she'll meet up with them there. So it gives them the ability they can kind of run around, do something. If they need to do something in town before they leave, this just a quick shopping thing. Be like, do you need to pick up potions, supplies of any type, torches, whatever? Buy those things now. Because you guys are immediately on the clock. You got to meet these people at 9 p.m. And I told them, hey, you guys got to walk some hours to get there. And it's already in the afternoon. So you got to get there, do those things, and get back. So that way you can get some amount of sleep before the festivities tomorrow. So you guys don't have exhaustion for the festival. So what you for sure don't want, especially Zarnok, who is one of the people who's competing in the games for sure, as a big challenger and is gambling on himself, to be a good performer. So it's like he is very, very motivated to be back on time. So that way he can get a good night's sleep, a good winks, good 40 winks. So that is the situation. So as you can see, this is very similar to my prep in general. This whole adventure for the one-shot is only 2 pages. That's it. And even that, like, some of this is severance condition, which we'll talk about, I think, at the end. I don't want to go over this first. That's something to do specifically with that one-player character. So that was it. So I knew that there was going to be the appeal. I was like, alright, I got that. Alright, now I need the scenes. Okay, first of all, you gotta talk to Pearl, so that's going to be scene number 1. You gotta get the call to adventure. That's a fully social scene. There's not a lot of checks to make there. They could have maybe asked for some more reward. Maybe not. Maybe. It kind of depends. They could have asked for more information. This opportunity to get some more information about what's going on, ask some questions back and forth. Try to persuade her, getting back into her good graces, which they've done a pretty good job of. So doing that sort of thing. With the party's prior misgivings, what keeps Pearl from believing they may be involved in the scam to extort her with Clovis's kidnapping? That's true. I think probably because they're in town. I think if they're supposed to meet her like out of town and they're holding on to Clovis, I think that they would. And then they had just been by her. They'd already, so timeline-wise, they had just been by her apartments yesterday. So to do that, to her townhouse to have a discussion. So it would be weird to be like, hey, I went and had a discussion before, like hours before I robbed their home. That would be a weird thing to do. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there is some suspicion there. But there is also sort of a duality that's in the relationship between herself and the steward. So the steward primarily has been the person who has been telling off the party. Her sort of butler. She has had very little contact with them since they left. So I think there is a duality where he's very strong because the steward's very protective of Pearl. Because he needs to be. Like, that's his job. Whereas Pearl is probably... I think she's a little bit probably more forgiving. And I don't think that she knows any of the specifics. It's kind of gone on with them. The steward knows that. She doesn't know that. She has to have some sort of plausible deniability in case they are brought in as criminals. Be like, oh, well, yeah, I met them on the road. They were nice. I gave them a place to stay overnight, but they only stayed the one night, kind of thing. And then they left the next day. So that way, she's not involved with any of that stuff. So I do think that there is this idea that there's enough separation between her and the party that I don't think she would immediately suspect that they were the ones who did it. I mean, she could have. I just don't... I guess that's maybe more like the NPC's temperament issue. Like, I don't think she... When I think of her being that person, I don't think that's a thing that would have come to her mind, if that makes sense. Okay, so I knew we were going to have that first. I knew I wanted to have at least 2 combats. I can't have a ton of combats because we have a very small window to play. We want to keep this one shot. If we try to have 3 combats, things are going to go pretty long, which is kind of what happened because we ended up having kind of 3 combats. But I only planned really for 2, really 1.5. We'll get there in a second. So I was like, all right, but I want to make sure they have some exploration stuff, an opportunity to talk to some other people if they want, trying to make sure that we're hitting all the pillars, getting everything in there. All right, Twilight Travel, DC 20. As the last of the sun smears across, I gave myself a little purple prose here, a little read aloud text. Sometimes I do that. I don't usually set it off like in bold or anything like that. Usually I use bold for proper nouns or things that I make sure I want to hit. I want to make sure that, like, hey, we're going to hit this Leviathan temple. I know that this is about Pearl and Clovis and Medivh's Bell and Madava Gora. So that way, the things that as I'm writing it down, and I think somebody will ask me about and I'll need to reference really quickly, those are usually the things that I bold. So, and then I write myself. Sometimes I write myself a little bit of descriptor text. Sometimes I read it out loud. Sometimes I just kind of paraphrase what it is. As the last of the sun smears the sky in purple hues, you roll into town and find Pearl garbed in practical but fashionable travel clothes. Shouldn't be an and there. I think I was going to do practical and fashionable. Practical but fashionable travel clothes in need of break again. And then I gave her a little, like, one-liner that she could throw out there. Just a little moment of levity. It's kind of a serious situation. And I think she's bringing a little bit of levity to it as her way of sort of coping with the situation. She's very, very worried about Clovis. She loves him very, very much. She's like, oh, these boots are so uncomfortable and heavy. You wear these all the time? Because, again, she's not an adventurer. And so they kind of talk about that. And they had a little scene with Zarnak, which was really fun, where he kind of like took her boots off and like tried to break them in a little bit. Just a little fun. And then they meet up. They have one more town to go to, and that's Madava Gora. And so they travel for another hour, and the last of twilight flees, and you arrive in Madava Gora. The glow of torch and lantern light. So at this point, I was like, okay, the sun's gone down. You guys are going to need light sources now. So you're traveling essentially in the dark. We only have 2 members of the party who cannot see in the dark, and 2 members who can. So, and we have Pearl with us, who is a halfling who also does not have dark vision, so she also needs a lantern. So they travel into Madava Gora, and reinforce here for myself, hey, Pearl does not know the exact location of where they're trying to get to. She doesn't know where the tunnels are. And then have this opportunity, and okay, as they come into town with lanterns, let them know, hey, this is a place that was clearly a larger town. This is something that this pilgrim had told them, this Nyx person, who I've just highlighted, had told them way back in the fairy, be like, oh yeah, I don't know what to do with my hometown, because a lot of people have left because the fairy brought in a bunch of business. So without the fairy, there's not as much commerce, so it's kind of a dying town. So they walk in there and they're like, oh, it seems like quite a few people used to live here, but most of the buildings you come across, most of the homes are kind of starting to fall down. They have broken windows, they have, they look abandoned. Doors broken in, things like that. So most of the places look abandoned. You see only a few buildings that have any light on in them at night. But you see this one person, only one person on the street, who is drawing water from the well in the dark with their lantern sort of sitting on the edge of the well. There's some back and forth. They're like, obviously they come in there, and my players immediately jump to, oh, shadowy person in the middle of the town by themselves. They must be an enemy. And I'm like, okay, it's just a random NPC. And then I have the NPC freak out on them because they're trying to do this thing in the dark, and then like 5 people in cloaks in the dark are trying to approach them, and they start freaking out. Like, I don't know these people. What are they going to do to me? So then they have the opportunity to meet up with Nyx. This is where the group starts to split up a little bit, where one of them wants to go ahead and scout the Sovereign. 2 of them want to stay with Pearl, and then one of them decides to finally recognizes that this is a familiar face and goes to talk to them, and then sort of creepily follows them and doesn't call out their name for a little bit until he gets sort of away from them. So it's an unfortunate situation where they kind of like stop them for about a block and then kind of have the conversation. That this was Nyx, this is the pilgrim that Caleb had met, our cleric had met. on the ferry ride over who had told me about this place and told me that, hey, I live in this place, but I don't know if I'm going to stay living there. And so I did this specifically so they had somebody who could give them the location of the tunnels. They could go out there and find the location of the tunnels, but the thing is that if they missed that, if they had the opportunity to do that and they didn't get basically a guide, if they don't do well on the checks to find the tunnels, they'll either get to the tunnels in a way in which they don't have any preparation, so the people there will be more prepared than they are coming into the situation. Or they're going to miss the timeline entirely, and at that point, I didn't write anything. I was like, something could happen to Clovis, and I left that kind of open-ended for myself. It's like, maybe in play, I'll come up with a good idea of something that could happen to Clovis, should they not show up, because, I mean, they could just kill the capybara, but I'm not sure why they would do that. If that's their kind of meal ticket. Killing their hostage is not a great way to get your demands met in that sort of situation, because then you don't have any leverage. Yeah, don't hurt Clovis. Clovis is best boy. So they have that conversation. Nyx is like, "Oh yeah, I know where the tunnels are. I can lead you there." So it gives them the opportunity to pick up a guide if they want to. And she was like, "Oh, if you guys want to come back and rest at my house, you can do that too if you don't want to make the journey all the way back." In the end, we just had them go back to town. But there was an opportunity they could have stopped here if they wanted to, or if things got really bad or they needed help from somebody they knew who they could go to in town to maybe get help. So the group slashes into the marshy polder, peppered with tree stumps, built the big wheels. I forgot to bring this up entirely. I didn't bring up the bilge wheels, but that's fine. So we knew that, and then they're traveling through. We get into our first combat, which is the attack of the Sturges. So the Sturges was another callback to the very beginning of our campaign. The first adventure they sort of went on, they were supposed to deal with find these Sturges, where these Sturges were coming from, because they were coming hot and heavy this summer, or into the spring. And they were more aggressive than usual. So the adventurers kind of were supposed to go find like their nest and, ideally destroy them, but at least find the nest where all the eggs were. They 100% welched on this adventure. I've talked about that before. They made it about one session in. They got in a couple of fights, went, this is way too dangerous, and then made their way out of it, and then just kind of like lied to the quest giver about having done it. And so things did not get resolved, and now they are dealing with the consequences of their actions. Yeah, players don't usually like that, but yeah, sometimes the consequences do come back and bite you in the butt. Sometimes it's Sturges, and so they literally bite you in the butt. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Sturges, they're like big mutant mosquitoes. That's all you really need to know. They're like roughly that sized. So, and large, about a loaf of bread size, I guess. Smallish cat. So, they have this, I knew that they were going to come in, they were going to attack, they were going to be like, oh, the Sturges again. Because they've had problems with the Sturges in the past, because, they didn't deal with the Sturges in the past. So, they hadn't come across a Sturge swarm before, because they were too low level. Now they're one level higher, so now they can get a Sturge swarm that kind of came in. And this is where I got into the thing, and I was showing it to one of my friends. They're like, hey, you got to be very, very careful with the new 2024. In fact, I'll just show you. That's actually much easier. I'll just show you. So we're going to go to a couple of Fight Club. Alright, so we've got 4 characters. They are level 2. We need Sturges. So this is an issue. So if you're not aware, they redid the encounter math for 2024. Slightly. So ideally, there we go. A party of second level adventurers, 4 of them, should be able to handle. It's high, but it's within the budget. 47 Sturges. And I didn't even put it that high. I think I put it at 35. Yeah, because I didn't put it into the feels deadly category. And I'm like, you cannot, especially in any sort of low level D&D, be like, put 7 on 1. Actually, more than that. It's almost 8 on 1. Oh, it's 9 on 1. You cannot do 9 on 1 in D&D. They can be fully surrounded. Like 8 characters completely around their square for each one of them. Like they'll die. They'll die. And once these things hit you and they're attached to you, they do auto damage. They don't even have to roll for damage anymore until you get them off you. I'm like, this will absolutely wipe this party. I could wipe this party with a quarter of these. Right? You can't do that. It's gonna suck for your players. You're so right. Sturgis to Sturge form is a 1/8 CR to 2 CR. Yeah. So but for a second level party, it's kind of like a solo monster, and Sturges don't really have anything that's kind of going on within the swarm. They hit kind of hard. That's about it. What side is it? Oh, this is Kobold Fight Club. So Kobold Plus.club. It's encounter math. So yeah, the new 2024 math I do not trust, and I have learned from nearly TPKing my group once before. That's like, oh, they changed the math, and to make everything way more difficult, to be able to give you more encounter bang for your budget. So you can put way more monsters on the field. Except more monsters is not better, and especially in 5e, because action economy is so important for balancing encounters, depending on how you feel about balancing encounters. But there's a big difference between being like, I try to ideally get about as many monsters on the field as there are player characters, roughly. A little bit more, a little bit less is okay, but solo monster fights don't work very well, and horde monster fights like that, where I'm going to throw like a dozen creatures at 4 people, often will be really bad on the players because they'll get swarmed. Yeah, the swarms have resistances to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing. Correct. Now, I mitigated that somewhat by actually giving them vulnerability to area of attack damage from magic, which my party doesn't have a ton of, so I knew it wouldn't come up a lot, but it does give them the ability to kind of more powerfully damage them, because they do have like 30-something hit points. I think they got quite a few hit points. The swarm does. So I did want to make sure that they were able to like do it, and then the people who were using area effect attacks had the ability to feel like, oh, they were doing significantly more damage. Like this was a good use of their things, even though they're technically only using it on one creature instead of multiple creatures, because the swarm is one creature. So there's a battlefield. I had this entire battlefield that I was going to set up that I was going to have them do, but because of something that a player introduced, which was that they had rolled a natural 1 on like their stealth check, I think, and they were like, I was like, okay, you tell me what that looks like, which is sometimes a thing that I'll do with players, is like, you tell me how you screw this up, how you fuck it up. They're like, oh, I'm walking around, I think everything's doing fine, and I'm looking around, and I think he said he went down to like do his magical tinkering or whatever he was. It was the artificer. He's like, and a vine from one of the nearby trees catches around my throat and clotheslines me. And I was like, okay, there weren't really supposed to be trees here, but we're gonna roll with it and be like, okay, yeah, you guys are definitely in the forested part of the polder still. Like they haven't completely cut down all the trees yet. So I'll be like, okay, so they are not in the middle of everything. So I was like, all right, so this is out. So instead of dealing with this stuff, I was just like, there's a bunch of trees around. So you guys have the ability to like get cover and get behind trees and stuff like that and try to hide. So sometimes you do that, you plan for something, and sometimes you toss it. So they didn't get surprised, but they didn't get any surprise either, because it was that natural 1 that kind of drew the attention to them. So the battle kicks off, they have the fight, the swarm comes in, and at the end of the round I did this thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to add Sturges every time at the end of the round. So new Sturges, like just the little individual CR 1/8 Sturges will enter. If things are going well for the swarm, they'll sit there and they'll just be kind of mooks that attack. They only have 5 hit points. At this point, the party can pretty much kill, are almost guaranteed to. Occasionally they might not, but in generally, with one attack, they will kill them. It's like, but also if I get the feeling like there's going to be too many Sturges, if I start rolling 3s at the end of every round and they're not focusing on those Sturges, and now suddenly there's 9 monsters on the battlefield, I have this thing, what they'll do is they'll actually, the existing Sturges will incorporate into the swarm, so they'll actually move into the swarm, and the swarm will regain 2 hit points, which is, with resistances, is more like 4 hit points. So, just to kind of give them, it makes the battlefield a little bit more dynamic. It didn't actually end up coming up because they kept killing. I rolled low every time. I think we only had 1 round in which 2 showed up. Otherwise, it was just 1. And they just killed them really easily and then focused back on the swarm. So, they fought much better than they have in some of the earlier encounters where they would get steamrolled by something like this. So they did that, and they did that, and there was never any regaining. They used some area effects on the swarm, which worked out really well. I gave them double damage on that. Gave them vulnerability to it, even though that's not mechanically what's supposed to happen. I was like, yeah, it's good use of it. And you guys don't have a ton of spells, so if you're going to use a spell for this, I want to make sure that it's got that oomph. So yeah, a fight with the Sturges, things go pretty well. And at this point, Severin's starting to fully develop the things that's kind of going on with him. So part of the thing that I did with this adventure, and this is a good point to talk about it, I feel like, before we get into the end, because that's when things go, as they so often do, awry, and things kind of go off the rails. Not in a bad way, just in like, okay, that's totally different than what I thought was going to happen. So, Severin's condition. So Severin has been nursing an injury. So Severin's got some backstory stuff that's going on. He's got some sort of paranormal creature that's sort of haunting him, though we don't know too much about it. Only starting to learn a little bit about what this creature is. So I didn't want to go fully expose what that creature is and everything that's going on with that, in case our player has an ability to come back into the campaign and they want to play that character again. I still want them to have kind of stuff going on. But they do have something else going on. So they, very early on in the campaign, they got KO'd. One of the things I'm starting to do in this campaign is that, hey, when you get KO'd, you get some sort of lingering injury that kind of goes on. It's one of the ways that we're kind of mechanically being like, hey, you don't want to do like pop-up, pop-down healing, where it's like, oh, you don't heal anybody until they go unconscious down to 0. So no healing gets wasted or whatever. Trying to sort of pull against some of those optimizing things and be like, no, but in reality, if you saw somebody who was really flagging in the fight, like, you would heal them. That would be the time to heal them. And so this time it's like, now if people fall down to 0, they have some sort of lingering effect that comes out of this. So in Severin's case, he got acid burned from an ooze, so way back. So we're talking about that first adventure they welched on. I think that's when that happened. Got acid burned on their arm, like real bad. So they had that happen, and they just rolled really poorly on the recovery rolls for pretty much the entire campaign. They went to doctors, they got medicine, they got salves, they got clean, they got stuff. Other people have gotten injuries and lost injuries in that time period, lingering injuries. The thing is, like, you can't say that it's bad rolls because they're actually rolling high. I need them to roll low. They're actually rolling high. So it's a mixed blessing when you have the good dice. And it's also fun. I like having a campaign where sometimes low rolls are really good, depending on what you're trying to do. So resource rolls, because I use the resource roll system for the injuries. Be like, so every time a new session comes up, you roll the die for whatever the die size is. Let's say D6 for your acided up open wound arm. And if you roll a 1 on the D6, it goes down to a D4. And at the beginning of that session, if you roll a 1 on that 1 D4, it goes down to just 1. And there's one more session where this still affects you. And then after that, it no longer affects you. It is mechanically healed. And they've just had really good luck with their D4s, and they've just rolled high, and they haven't rolled a 1 in a very long time to go down from 1d6 to 1d4. So they've just got this thing that's just been hanging on with them again and again and again. And so they finally went back to sort of the barber surgeon in town and was like, hey, is there something you can do for my arm again? Because it's not really getting better. is probably getting like septic and stuff. Like it's getting gross. Things are going really bad. He's like, okay. He's like, I've got this one thing I can try. Player character does not go into, and he's like, it's it's unorthodox or whatever, and it's expensive. It's an expensive treatment. I think he pays him like 10 gold or something like that. It's quite expensive. And then as he sort of is debriding the wound again, which if you don't know what that means, it means cleaning out the wound, like physically cleaning out the wound, usually with like a wire brush. Fails the con save, passes out, as is expected from the pay. Doctor does what they do, or Barber in this case, does what they do while they're gone. It's like, all right, you're patched up, you're ready to go. He wakes up sort of like in the barber shop while this guy's like cutting somebody else's hair and pulling somebody else's tooth. Just really playing into sort of like the historical barber surgeon aspect. It's like it's a one-stop shop for all your health needs. You can get everything from teeth pulled enemas to a clean shave. We do it all. Waking up and being like, has their arm all bandaged up, and he's like, okay, yeah, you're good to go. Remember to come back to me in the morning. It's very important. You need to come back to me in the morning to get the things removed. Oh, well, our friend does not do that. Even with some reminders, does not go back and do it. So, I knew what that thing was. I was like, what is this guy going to do to try to help him? Because he's already gone to this guy, and this guy's given him treatment before. So what new thing is he going to do? So it's like, oh, what he's going to do is he's going to make a troll skin graft. And so he makes a troll skin graft to like help the wound heal itself with the regenerative properties of a troll skin. A good barber's portrayed. Yeah, and Misadventures of Flapjack. Yes, absolutely. I don't think about that show very often. It's a pretty good show, though. I enjoyed it. Yes, and their sea-timey, yeah, barber kind of very much fits that aesthetic. So knew that was going to go on his arm. Didn't get that taken care of. So I knew that was going to be an issue. I knew this was going to be like, hey, if you don't do the thing that the doctor tells you to do, something bad's going to happen. Because there's a little bit into, like, leaning a little bit into the D&D troll lore, which is kind of like, if you get troll, essentially, like, DNA integrated into your body, you just become a troll. What happens? You start turning into a troll. So, yeah. So that is what this is. So Severin's condition. Severin is actively turning into a troll. And so what I did is I went down here, and I know that you guys can't see it, but I'm going to hold up my copy. Ta-da! Ta-da-da! It's got a whole bunch of handwritten notes all over it. But for each of these sort of scenes as I went down, I added like a number to them, just so I had the number, so I knew each time that one of these scenes comes up, his condition's getting worse. Like we can see it very acutely start to pick up and move. So the first one is, the stomach growls. He's got this rumbly in his tumbly. In the middle of the afternoon, it's like, oh, my stomach's really, really hungry, but that food doesn't kind of seem to satiate fully, even when you're eating it. And then we get down, go further on, there's this familiar echoey chuckles. So this is when Severin decides to split off here. So while Caleb goes to meet Nyx and the other two stay with Pearl, Severin is like, I'm going to go sneak ahead. And it's like, okay, as you go off, you get this familiar echoey chuckle. Oh, springtime bud, the equinox comes and you're ready to blossom. That's his sort of like this paranormal thing that's haunting him. Who's clearly very pleased about what's happening to Severin. Once we get into the Sturges, and they go into the Sturge fight, as he's still ahead. It's like as the things tear into you, and you feel this itchiness on you, and the wound had already been itchy before, so I leaned into that as what we talked about, the sort of itchiness of the wound, and it's like now it's spreading across like the arms and chest and back, Like it's clearly expanding quickly. So we go into that, and then we go into sort of our next scene, which is the find the tunnel scene. So now at this point, they've exited the tree line, which were these random trees that we invented on the spot that were not supposed to be there, but that's how it goes. You just adapt and overcome. So they meet out of that, and I was like, okay, you guys are fully on an open plain now. There are no more trees to hide behind. It's just open stumps and marshy ground. So we get their survival. They have advantage on the survival check because of Nyx. Or they get turned around, which means the clock's ticking down. Just kind of give them a little prod. Again, I didn't know what, if anything, might be the downside of them taking too long. I didn't know what I was going to do with Clovis yet. I didn't come to that, but I didn't, because they ended up getting Nyx with it to take them as their guides. They got advantage on those checks. Oh, the good body horror for the troll skin. Yeah, it's not great. It gets worse, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you feel about it. So, we have the survival. They go through the muck wading, which is sort of like this one exploration encounter. One of them is like, okay, there's like a deep ravine in there that used to be underwater, but now it's not underwater, so now it's a ravine. You kind of have to get across. And it's like, okay, I'm going to put sewer plague down there, so there's a whole bunch of filth down there, a bunch of stagnant water that's gotten real bad. And like, so you obviously don't want to fall in there. Just giving them the heads up, you need to get across this. And so I didn't know what the checks were going to be, so I decided to make it so they could jump across and not have to do the con saving throw at all. So it's like, all right, it's going to be a two-part thing. There's an athletics aspect as far as jumping across, but then there's an acrobatics check on the other side to like stick the landing essentially, because you've got a whole bunch of muddy ground and these slopes are not sturdy by any means. So they run through that, they go through it. Everything goes pretty well. Severin absolutely, no, not Severin, Caleb, our cleric, absolutely beefs it, with advantage, trying to jump across, as does Swain. Zarnok had jumped across, they were using a rope, they got the advantage, and then they both rolled like single digits on both dice. And so I was like, at the end, you both slide down in there. But both made their con save, so everything was fine. So they got across, no problem with anything. They do see Severin's still ahead of everybody. Does see the light sort of coming out of the tunnel, kind of sneaks up to check it out, and sees it, and then hides in the shadows. And at this point, as they're kind of coming up to the tunnel, we go to this part right here. So sort of, I can go with gain the bite attack because combat. I wanted that to be a combat thing that came out. As is sort of the regain 2 HP. I was like, all right, but I need to describe that the changes continues in the scene. So I'm like, oh, your teeth are hurting in sort of like a growing pains kind of hurt as you run your tongue across them. They're getting a little sharp. Like you feel like they're sharper than they used to be. They're kind of coming to a point, your teeth. There's this physical manifestation keeps happening and has sort of like, again, like those growing pains like in your mouth, like a full mouth toothache almost, sort of radiating. So yeah, everybody else starts to catch up. They know that Pearl needs to go up there alone. They're only expecting Pearl, so I let them know that there is a down tree. I didn't have this in here, but this is one of the things where when Caleb was originally talking to Nyx, and it didn't sound like they were going to take Nyx, I was like, okay, well, I've got to give Nyx has to give you some sort of directions if you're not going to take her with you, because they decided not to. I was like, okay, well, you're going to go there, you're going to cross the ravine, and when you cross the ravine, you're going to look for a singular, like, downed tree, like, down that's, like, on its side. It's like, once you go past that, that's where the tunnel will be. So they were able to find the downed tree, and they could use that as cover and hide behind it. So everybody except Severin, who had run around to the other side of the tunnel to hide on the far side. And so that's sort of the situation we're at. Pearl sort of gets up. We forgot that Pearl had brought with her a purse of 500 coins. She got copper coins, so it's only worth 5 gold. But she was like, oh, in case we need to pretend like we have the money. So she had a purse with 500 coins in it, 500 copper. But they'd given it to Severin. And so she goes to like be like, all right, go ahead, and I'll go up there and I'll show them that I have the money, and she starts patting herself, like, oh, Severin's got the Severin has it. Who went ahead, and they're not sure where Severin is because Severin's hiding. They know Severin's around, they just don't know specifically where. Um, so she's like, she pulls out her own coin purse, which for sure does not have 500 coins in it. Uh, and then kind of goes ahead to go up there to make the deal. They start going into the deal, and we go right down here into Chokes and Chases, which is our inner thing. So we have 6 figures emerge out of the tunnel. Sorry, this is supposed to be 5 figures. 5 figures emerge out of the tunnel mouth. So, and then I just have their stats. So I was going to use the stats for the thug, and then 3 Grimlocks. Upon seeing the lone figure, because I didn't want to use, I just needed something that was this CR. So I was like, I could use a guard, I could use bandits or whatever, but I was like, I'm just going to use, because I wanted something that was a little bit different, so I was like, I'll use Grimlocks. So pick that up. So I know that they're going to emerge out of the tunnel. They're not going to see Clovis at first. So upon seeing Pearl, they'll be like, okay, do you have the money? She's like, yeah, I have the money. Great, bring the creature, bring the thing. And then the last one kind of walks out holding capybara, which if you don't know, capybaras are pretty big, so it's like a two-hander job. They're probably like, what, 50 pounds in weight? So, 25 kilograms, 30 kilograms, somewhere in there. They're pretty big. I mean, they're the largest rodents? I think largest rodents in the world? I think that's right. They're big. They're kind of the size of a small pig. And the idea is that what the thieves want to do is, once they have Pearl isolated and alone out here on this, marshy place with no witnesses, instead of, why would they give the capybara back to her when they could keep the capybara, keep Pearl for a future ransom, and have her 500 gold? So very opportunistic. So obviously they're going to do a little sneaky double cross here. I guess it's just a single cross. We already know they're bad guys. It's going to be a single cross, not a double cross. Do I work with their players when their character's physical form is forcefully transfigured in such a disturbing manner? Oh, I did not. This player in particular was very open-ended. I knew that they would be pretty cool with it. I didn't feel like this would be a strange thing for them. I think that they were going to be into it, and they were into it. So that would be something I didn't have to worry about too much because I knew this is the PC that is exiting the campaign. So there's going to be no long-term effects of this transformation. It's just something that's happening to them. Oh, you guess, is there a difference between playing polymorphed into a chicken versus decaying into a troll? Yeah, I guess so. In the session, not really, but it is something. Is like, I went to leave. So one of the good things about choosing the troll to turn them into, because I was like, I could have had them transform into something. I wanted them to be put in a position, because I'm thinking about the end goal. The end goal is like, I need a PC that's going to leave the campaign, which means I need to start to cut off routes of ways they can stay in the campaign, which is like, oh, because they might try to convince Severin to stay. Oh, they might try to restrain Severin, which they do in the fight. But it's like, this guy is turning into a monster. You can't, like, how long are you going to try to keep him around as he's actively transforming into a troll? And a troll is a much more difficult monster than you are capable of handling as a party. So, yeah, there is a difference between being polymorphed into it, because he still has his faculties start to degrade during this last fight. As we'll get to it, but his faculties start to degrade as he becomes more and more trollish. 50 pounds of, oh, yeah. Sweet little Clovis. Sweet big Clovis, I guess. So yeah, so they take that out, and then I knew when I was making this last encounter, I was like, okay, this is going to be just like a bog standard fight, knowing thinking about things that my players would probably do. I was like, they'll come out, they'll have the capybara, Pearl will have the conversation. Uh, they're probably going to try to take Pearl, but what's probably going to happen is the players are going to jump out of their hiding spots and open up, and it's just going to be a fight, and that'll be the end of it. It's like, so I want something that's a little bit more chaotic than that. I want something that's a little bit kind of strange. It's kind of tragic. Well, yeah, yeah, it is kind of awful. It's not great. You are correct. Turning into a troll and losing your human faculties, it's full on body horror. It is what it is. Yeah, and loss of self. Uh, yeah, it's fun. Player loved it, so that's what's important, and people had fun. That's all we're trying to do. So we accomplished our goals. So I knew that they were going to have, all right, so this is just going to degrade into just like a bog standard fight in an open plane. It's not particularly interesting. How do I add some interest in here? How do I add that extra little flair? One of the things I like to do, sometimes we talk about when you're building an adventure or something like that, you want to add some sort of twist element, some sort of element of surprise. Uh, Not necessarily a twist. So twist is a bad word for it. Twist is one of the things you can do. It's sort of a situation. Because if you have every adventure have a twist in it, you run into the M. Night Shyamalan effect, which is like, okay, everybody just knows that something, once we get two-thirds of the way through this adventure, something's going to be different than what we thought, and something's going to be a reversal. So you don't always want to work in a reversal, but you want that aspect. So it's not necessarily a twist always, but you do want something that ups the stakes in some way or changes the environment in some way. So I was like, I need something here that's going to do that. I was like, look, I know that there are chokers in this tunnel. This is part of my world building. I know there's chokers in this tunnel. Chokers, a D&D monster that doesn't get used very often. They're fun, though. They're interesting. So I was like, all right. So these guys probably don't know there's a choker in this tunnel. What if that choker attacks them? So I'm going to set up a situation where I'm going to have to basically put the PCs in a position where they're going to need to make a choice. The idea that I had is like, okay, the choker's going to pounce on the guy that's got Clovis. Easily going to kill that guy. No problems there. That guy's going to go down. The choker's going to chase after Clovis, who's immediately going to book it. There's a bunch of predators around. There's a lot of bad stuff that's happening. Immediately going to sprint for the wood line and potentially get eaten by more Sturges. So there's the Sturges that are a problem out there, and then there's going to be this choker creature that's going to immediately start chasing it. So you have them being chokers, you have the Sturges, and you have so Clovis running away is one aspect. So it's going to be the split. This is going to be the choice. Who's going after Clovis to try to protect Clovis, and who's going to stay here because you're going to have to protect Pearl. So that's the decision of what to do. So the PCs have to decide who's chasing down the choker before it gets to Clovis, and who's going to send back and defend Pearl and or Nyx. Nyx wasn't there, so we didn't have to worry about that aspect. But defend Pearl against the brigands. We're going to try to, kidnap her instead. Halfling nap her. Half nap. They're going to half nap her. So that's the situation I wanted to create. Now these are the grand plans that do not stand first contact with actual players. This stuff does not really happen as I intended. So things come out, people decide to do things. Thing is before I have an opportunity to have the choker, because this was very sort of like, okay, when it feels right, the choker's going to pounce on the one that's on Clovis's handler. So as I'm building up to that moment where it's going to pop out, where they're still out there talking. And then one of the players is like, yeah, I'm going to pull out a crossbow bolt, and I'm going to cast Catapult on it at the guy who's holding Clovis. So they're kicking off, as players are wont to do, they're the ones kicking off initiative. So that hits. They see this guy does a bunch of damage to this guy, because Catapult is like 3d8 damage. So, and this guy's kind of a moob. Doesn't quite take him down, though. Just by HP wise. He had like 2 hit points left, I think. Yeah, I think he had 2 hit points left. So he's like so close. Because they did, no, maybe he did 10 damage. He might have only had 1 hit point left. Either one or two. It's very few amounts of hit points. Like whatever the next attack is definitely going to kill him. And so I'm like, all right, cool. You did the work for me. I'm just going to co-op that moment and be like, that's when. And I had already explained that Severin, because of his vantage point on the back side of the tunnel, was able to see this choker creeping up behind them. But hadn't had a chance to do anything with it yet. So we knew that the choker was on the scene. They kicked off combat. We rolled initiative, put the choker at the top of initiative. I don't have to make my monsters roll initiative. I can put my monsters wherever I want. I usually have them take 10, but I was like, I'm going to let the choker go first because I wanted to kick off this split off, so that way there'll be a decision everybody will need to make on their turn in the first round of combat as to what they're going to do. So we roll initiative. The choker jumps on that guy, and I describe in perhaps too graphic detail. So if you are a queasy kind of person, as to things being described, hold off for just a second. Turn away, and I'll say what it is, and then you can turn back. So the choker has like serrated like teeth kind of things on their hands, and I just because this guy's only got like 1 or 2 hit points, I just narrate that this thing jumps on him because they're small creatures, kind of like jumps on him like a monkey. You see him like wrap his hand around this guy's face and just rip the skin off of it. And he screams as he falls down and dies. And Clovis, of course, freaks out and starts immediately running in as the fastest tangent he can take to get away from literally everything that's happening. And then this creature starts booking it after Clovis. So I set up that stuff, and then they're like, oh, okay, now we're going to go into regular initiative. So the issue was I was going to make the chase be like a full chase scene, but the issue I have is that Clovis is faster than the choker, and Severin is next to initiative, and Severin is a rogue who has cunning action, who can dash as a bonus action, and then dash as their standard action. So there's literally no way he can't catch up to those things. So instead of doing that, it just becomes a second wing of the fight that kind of happens off to the side. So that kind of becomes that thing. And at first, this creature's not paying attention to Severin. It's really trying to go after Clovis, trying to lead Severin further and further away from the party, mechanically trying to get him away. And as he comes in and does that, it's like, oh, you feel as you're chasing after this thing, you feel a primal instinct to go after it. This is not like I'm chasing this thing down to protect Clovis. I'm chasing this thing down, and I am going to kill it and eat it. And that becomes the shift. It's like, you now have a bite attack. Also, it's the start of your turn. You regain 2 hit points. And people are like, what? It's like, yeah, he regains 2 hit points. And then I talk about how the irises go scarlet, and one of the characters rolled high enough on their perception check to see it's like, and it's like, oh, his eyes look different, and then describing to the players, like, you get the sense, like, you almost want to run on all fours, in a more sort of like primal, bestial kind of manner. Apparently, the player's into body bots. That NPC is got no face to be modded anymore. But I mean, like, the chokers are horrific creatures with these sort of like the way I kept describing it is like Velcro almost. Like, that's sort of the feeling. That's sort of like how many like teeth they have on them, except they're like serrated, so they rip and tear until it's done. So then he splits off, and so they start moving further and further away. The rest stay there. Somebody guns, Swain does their thing. Zarnok kind of tries to get up into the mix. Actually, Zarnok's at the very end, so everybody else is kind of ranged. They sit back. Caleb and Swain sit back and kind of pop off shots, which means that there's nobody in between the 5 guys that are standing here and Pearl. So the leader just turns around, looks at the guys, and goes like, "Forget the rat, grab the girl. She's worth a lot more." And so 2 of the toughs immediately go and manhandle Pearl and start pulling her back into the tunnels, as the rest of them rush at I guess, who did they attack on that first round? I can't even remember. I guess Zarnok. I guess they kind of rushed up on Zarnok, who was probably ahead of everybody. So the fighter doing fighter things, and then the fighter has 3 people on them, and then these other 2 are trying to pull Pearl back into the tunnel. So they've kind of grappled, they're moving at half speed, but they're pulling her in there. So it's like, if you guys don't do anything, she's going to disappear from combat, and then who knows what happens to Pearl. So you have your different areas that, like, aspects of the battlefield are expanding very quickly, and the things you need to protect are actively moving away from the party. And then the fight kind of goes out. And what ended up weird that I hadn't really thought about as I was playing it is that my player, who's turning into a troll after the fight's pretty much said and done for the most part, decides that they're going to turn feral on the party. I hadn't really thought about this. I figured just like, oh, I was going to give them this wisdom saving throw, be like, oh, all creatures at this point kind of become enemies, and there's like a wisdom save. So I didn't have to go through any of that because he immediately turned on his allies. Our beautiful Severn boy, he immediately turned on all his allies and started attacking Swain. And so there's a little bit of a drawn out fight between the party and Swain, party and Severn, and they eventually down Severn, and Caleb takes a mace and crushes his skull in. They do a quick job burying him, they get Clovis back, and then we kind of narrate the ending. So it took a little bit longer than I was expecting, actually quite a bit longer. Mainly because there was an entire fight that I really wasn't prepared to do, and Severn was at basically full hit points at the end of the fight because of his regeneration as a troll. But they were able to do that. They do have somebody who can do fire damage. The Artificer has Firebolt. That's the only attack spell they have, and they do, I think they have another attack one. Yeah, they had fire. They didn't have any acid. They just had the one fire. But they don't know that Severn has turned into a troll. They don't know what's happening with Severn. Most of that, because Severn decided to go off in stealth for a lot of the mission by themselves, the party didn't see a lot of the changes that were happening because Severn decided to go and scout ahead and didn't share some of the stuff, which is very much how the player plays their characters. They often do not coordinate things with the party sometimes, so there is some of that aspect as well. They just didn't do that, so they didn't really know what was going on until it was really too late to do anything about it. So yeah, they get into a fight. They kill Severn. They don't know Severn's a troll, so they don't finish Severn's body off with fire. So they bury Severn and they leave. And I was like, okay, well, as you guys are thinking about the festivities of tomorrow, and now there's this bittersweet aspect because you guys just made the long trek back, many hours of walking in the darkness of night, in pretty much silence except for a whimpering capybara as the sort of background music. And you lay your heads down to sleep, and you think about, the fun festivities of tomorrow, this big festival that's about to kick off, but you guys are one less. Your number is one less than it was before, as this PC has sort of exited. They have died. And as you guys put your heads to pillows and close your eyes, thinking about the morning to come and better times to come, we slash cut over to the field of a fresh grave, and a hand shoots out of it, and we see the mangled body of Severn with its half split open head pulling itself free because they didn't fully fire out the body. They didn't burn the body. So this leaves the door open, so that way we can have our Severn can reintegrate back into the campaign when the player comes back if they want to play Severn again, or if they want to make a new character, they make a new character when they come back. And once they get to, maybe their work situation that decides, we don't know. We're hoping that this is a very temporary situation, so we're hoping the player has the ability to come back. So I liked using the troll because it left that player character in an area where it's like that player character could very much walk back into the campaign, and you guys could deal with that aspect of them being a troll, or could become an NPC or a monster in the world, or you never see him again, and any of those answers is kind of fine. But it gives this nice little teaser exit for it. And so yeah, that was how I exited this PC in the campaign. Player really loved it. They were like, I've always wanted the opportunity to turn into a monster. Something I didn't know. Something I just did. Like it was really cool, and they enjoyed it. So it was a nice send off for them, for the player, for this character. Gave the party something. The party got something that was not just a one shot. They still have their rewards from Pearl that they can call in favors on her, which means that they have helped to sort of mend their relationship with Pearl, which gives them a lot of more social mobility and ability to maybe deal with aspects of the city and the greater island, and access to people and places and things that they might otherwise not have if they weren't able to mend this relationship with uh, a very popular courtesan. So as for the mechanics of making a one shot, it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, I only wanted a handful of scenes. I knew this would take a little bit longer. It took longer than I was expecting when we had basically an entire other fight at the tail end of it, as they killed off Severin's character. But yeah, I mean, it's super simple. We have I knew that I wanted to do it. This is pretty much how I do my notes. As you can see, I don't need to do a ton of prep. I just need to prep a little bit for myself. And that was very simple. I think did I save any of my handwritten notes? Maybe not. So this is usually not my first draft. Usually I take one of these little guys. I think I threw it away. Classic me. Take one of these little guys and I'll sit down with a pen and just kind of start thinking about, okay, what are some things that I want to show up? Okay, so I know I need about 6 scenes. Let's think of a series of scenes that would be 6 scenes. Kind of going through that. So did I have 6 scenes? I don't even know if I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I only had 5 because I technically combined an exploration and a combat scene here at the end, because just for time aspect, I wanted to make sure that we were going to get it done. So I decided to, instead of making a totally different chase scene for Clovis, maybe after the fight, to be like, no, it's just going to be 2 things happening at the same time, and splitting the party so that way it makes the combat a little bit more difficult without me having to add more enemies or higher powered enemies to the fight, because most of these guys are pretty easy. What are they called? The Grimlocks only have 11 hit points, so they're really easy to take out. The Joker, I will say I gave a lot more HP to, just because I wanted them to stick around a little bit, because I wanted it to be a little bit more narratively satisfying. I know some people are like, oh, you should never fudge the monster HP, but it's like the thing only has 13 HP and is actively not attacking people. So since it's actively not attacking people, I'm not going to worry too much about it getting damaged. Because it was trying to go after Clovis for like 2 rounds before it actually turned around on Severin and actually started attacking Severin. So that way they could get further away, so this thing was taking opportunity attacks and running. And so until they were like almost 90 feet away from the rest of the party. And at which point, now that Severin's isolated and has done some damage to this thing, it wheels on him and starts attacking him. And very quickly, like, restrained him and put down. Like, Severin was very much up-down during the fight. Like, this choker would have killed Severin's character many times. At least 2 times over, probably. But the idea is that because it's a troll, he just regenerates 2 hit points at the start of his turn. So every time he gets KO'd, when it becomes his turn, which he goes right after the choker, so the choker would grab him, down him, and then he'd gain 2 hit points and wake back up. And get back up and attack the thing, and then it become the choker's turn, and it would attack and hit him again because it has him grappled and restrained. So it has 2 attacks with advantage on both attacks. And I was just hoping to get the crit in, so that way it starts like choking them. The choker part of the choke name is that they actually like put their hand like over your mouth with their sort of Velcro hand, and then you can't breathe, and you can't scream. Again, they're interesting creatures that don't get used a lot in D&D. If those people are wrong, those knobs and dials are there for you to turn. Yeah, I think so too. I think so, because this choker only has 13 hit points, and I was like, it's not a lot of hit points, and it's not really the focus of this scene. So that is a thing where it's just like, because I think it ended up with like something almost like 40 hit points, because everyone was just wailed on it pretty good early on. And I was keeping track of it, but I was like, I'm not going to really start messing with any of the hit point stuff until it actually gets into combat with you. So yeah, that's sort of how it goes. It was pretty simple. Did not really do any treasure. I didn't put any of the treasure in here. I'll roll up some minor loot because they did say they stopped to loot the bandits, but I didn't give them any treasure for it. So I need to. Plus, they've got to split up all of Severin's gear that they have, which is I don't think Severin has anything in particular note that's not just standard adventuring gear. He might have a potion on him. Other things that happened in this. Well, let's finish talking about making an adventure. So this was a one shot. Like I said, it took me about 2.5 hours to make, which is not a ton of time, but it's not no time either. Probably would have been. I'd probably say that this probably took me about 2 hours to make, and then probably the last 30 minutes is probably me like doing some of these hand notes. Like because of the way that I run, other DMs wouldn't need to do this, but I try not to use a lot of electronic devices when I run. So I needed to write down all the stats for all my monsters and stuff on this sheet, so I'd have them. So I had to transcribe some stat blocks, and I'd rather do that than print out an entire other sheet of paper to keep track of. Some DC, some stuff like that. Have the initiative on here. But yeah, some extra stuff like that, like putting together 5 stat blocks just kind of takes a little bit of time to hand transcribe them. So that took a little bit longer, plus having to look it up, which, if you're the sort of DM who runs off a laptop, you don't need to do that. You can pull up the monsters as you're doing it and track the initiative like that and do those sorts of things. That's just not my preferred playstyle. I like to have things beforehand. So it would go pretty quickly. And yeah, so that's sort of just how this works. I just kind of give myself a little bit of... I very much follow the old... Oh gosh, now I'm going to forget the name of the channel. There's a YouTube channel. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of the channel. It's an older channel, which doesn't really upload anymore. But was very, very popular. Oh my gosh. I'm going to kick myself in the butt for not remembering it. Anyways, the general advice, which is really, really great advice just for prepping and adventure creation in general, is prep. No, it's not Sly Flourish. I would remember Sly Flourish. I've been following him for a very long time. Anyways, the general adventure, maybe you'll get it once I say the line, is prep what you're not comfortable improvising. Like, that's how you should go about your prep. And I think that's very much a golden rule of prep. Is you only need to prep as much as you're not going to be comfortable winging it. So like I said, I prepped a battlefield just like with a Sturge battlefield just to have it. Just so I could give them something that was a little bit more interesting than just in the open plain. They decided there were trees there at the beginning of the scene, so I was like, alright, there's trees there. Sure, I don't care. I can throw this away, I don't need this. I'm happy to drop that for something that my players thrown in there to be improvising. And then, other players called it out. They're like, I thought you said this was like an empty place. It's like, oh yeah, the rest of it's empty, but this part that's closer here by the village, they haven't cut down all the trees yet. They go, okay. So just kind of like, again, a lot of your job as a Dungeon Master or Game Master is trying to take disparate elements and just trying to like create sinew connections between it. That's really a lot of your job. A lot of your work kind of goes into just kind of making stuff kind of glue it together. Being the glue between all the different weird stuff that happens in a D&D game. So yeah, dropping the battlefield, but doing stuff like that. I also like doing things like, I'm gonna make sure I'm thinking of like what this character might say, this NPC might say, so I might give them like one line of dialogue. Like, I'm not gonna give them a whole like paragraph of stuff. I don't care that much, but I do want to give them like, okay, here's one thing they want to talk about. So I'm like, they want to talk about understanding. So clearly the creature that is following this sort of paranormal creature, that supernatural creature, that Severn is cursed with is kind of following him along and is happy about the transformation that's happening. Uh, thinks that this is funny, that this is good. It pleases this creature, whatever it is. Or make sure that I wanted to have the line in there from Pearl to have the opening be like, I'm in need of your help, adventurers. I wanted this to be the way that I built it, I wanted it to be very classic, sort of Leia kind of vibes. That was sort of the image that popped into my head was the hologram of Leia with kind of like throwing back the thing and being like, Obi-Wan Kenobi, I need your help. So I was like, okay, I need your help, adventurers. You're the only people I can turn to, and I need your help. And she sort of throws back her own hood to do a very similar kind of thing. A little homage, if you want, to some classic movies. Though it feels weird to call Star Wars a classic movie, but that is, I guess, true now. It is not a new movie. And then doing stuff like some of these, like having this very up to interpretation reward. Be like, oh, I can give you hard cash, but I prefer that you guys come to Pearl and have like a scene with Pearl to ask her for something important. Something that's like it's like the NPC version, the D&D NPC version of a Monopoly get out of jail free card. Be like, just hang on to this. Whenever you need a favor, come to Pearl, remind her of this, and then, it's a social currency thing, and she'll try to pay you back with it. She'll try to help you out in this situation, if she can. So, but she can also if you just need money, she can also just give you money. She just didn't have enough money to pay for the ransom. And having some talking points as well, I find that those are super helpful for me when I'm doing it. Is like, oh, I need to remind them that she wants to come along, and that, oh, why are you? We don't want you to come along, because that's generally what the players will always say. Was like, nope, we don't need any more people we need to protect. It's like, oh, I wouldn't send you to do something that I'm not willing to do, and Clovis needs me, and you don't even have to worry about me. I'll meet you further on down the road. You don't have to even protect me the whole time. Still trying to figure out the YouTube. No, yeah, I know it's bugging me. Am I gonna have to stop and look at this? This is gonna be. I'm gonna find it. WebDM. That's the channel. WebDM. Found it. Got it. Took me a minute, but we got there. We got him. We got him, guys. We got him. Yeah, WebDM is the channel I'm thinking of. Jim Davis. Jim Davis is the person who gave the advice. I could remember his name, but I couldn't remember his last name. To prep only what you're not comfortable improvising. So some of as you'll see, a lot of these notes are help for me to improvise. That's what a lot of it is. They're tools. A lot of good prep is helping you to be able to improvise in the session. That's one of the main things you're going to be doing, because you don't know what the players are going to throw at you. And the moment they start interacting with something, whatever you've planned, whatever interaction you've planned for them to do, as we saw with sort of like, I wanted that to be a chase scene, ended up not being a chase scene, ended up being a fight. And something like that. Oh yeah, no, you're welcome. Yeah, it was going to bug me too. Not remembering what the channel was. WebDM, got it. So, yeah. So for me, it's about prepping to improvise. I think it's a golden rule for prep, and the golden rule for building an adventure design. Be like, okay, I know what the stakes are. I know what the bad guys want out of this. I know what their leverage is. I know what they're trying to do to get the things. What they're going to try to do. How they're going to try to make the situation worse. I also know that there's this choker aspect that's sort of like this wild card aspect in the adventure that could be a source of good, but if everybody had descended on the choker would turn around and start attacking them, and now they're fighting both the chokers and the bandits. So, give them that nice that spice of chaos to be like, I'm gonna put the toy box in front of the players, and we're gonna see what they do, and the decisions they make. They could all die. They could be fine. It depends on what they do, and that's the That's the spice of D&D for me. Just be like, I'm going to put this stuff out here for you to mess around with, and we'll see what kind of hijinks you get up to. So yeah, a lot of these are like, okay, I know the place you're going, I know when you need to be there, I know the route there, I know what you're going to get out of it, and all this extra aspect. And now you've got to protect Pearl too because she's coming along. Even though the way that I've been running NPCs in this campaign, and this might be useful for you in your campaigns if you're running campaigns, or just any adventure. If you have an NPC there, especially just basic NPCs, they can't be in fights. They have like a handful of hit points, and they're going to immediately die. So you ideally do not want that. So what I've told my players, and sort of the situation, it's always up to them. Is be like, okay, this came up a lot with the last adventure that they had Japheth with them, which was another NPC who's kind of a thiefy, roguey kind of guy. So he's got some stats, but he's not particularly powerful, and he can't really fight very well. But he is sort of like a thiefy, roguey kind. So he's kind of guiding them, but he can also help with some rogue stuff. He can sneak around pretty decently. And so what I told the players is like, look, we will assume that he's just not in combat. He's in combat like he's doing his own thing in combat. So we're not going to he's not one of our main characters. We're not going to pan the camera over to him and spend a lot of time on him. You can assume if you guys are fighting characters, and I say that there are 6 bad guys here, you can pretty much assume there is a 7th bad guy who is fighting Japheth the entire time. There's one extra one which Japheth is dealing with most of the time. And so they're off just kind of having their background. They're like, oh, there's stuff happening in the background. But they're not things. So that way I don't accidentally kill the guides. You don't feel bad about not protecting the guides. You feel like but the guide's also never going to outshine you in combat or situations like that because they're not really fighting with you. So if you want them to be in the combat, which means that they'll be helpful for you in the combat, then they get into initiative. And then they become a liability in combat. So sometimes that happens. That happened with Japheth in the Dark Mantle fight, where it's like, okay, everybody at one point got downed in that fight. Again, this was the CR encounter building thing that was like, oh, the math's different now. I put too much stuff in here. I should have only used 2 Dark Mantles instead of 3. And that would have been a much better challenge for them. A much more appropriate challenge. And so he's kind of like not in initiative until almost everybody's down, and then he's like, oh, well, he can at least go like stabilize somebody. So it's like, okay, now he's going and doing things, and he's grabbing people's potions and putting them down their throat, and that's sort of what he's focused on doing. So they're kind of like having this helper around, but also like once they're into the fray, they're into the fray. So if you want their help, you have to take the risk. You get the reward, but you also take the risk that something dies. And for a character like Jeff, it's like, this guy's your guide, and he's the way that you're making money off of this job. So if you let him die, you basically lose the job. And so you only get what you can find in here, and you're probably gonna sever some bonds or burn some bridges with some different groups in the city if you let this guy die on your watch. So that's sort of how I deal with the NPCs in this campaign. And so that was sort of the thing with Pearl and Nyx, is like, yeah, they're going to take Pearl, but I'm not going to have Pearl's... We're not going to bloat combat even more by having me sit there, roll NPCs attacking monsters and my monsters attacking my NPCs. Like, that's not a good use of our time at the table. We don't care. They're not here to kill Pearl. They're just trying to take her away so they can ransom her back to somebody at the city. Somebody will pay for Pearl. She's very popular. So that's one of the ways that I've been trying to do things. Let's see, other things about sort of building these guys. Yeah, like I said, sometimes I leave myself a little flavor text if I want to know. Sometimes that's helpful for me because sometimes I don't know. I think sometimes the hardest thing for me when I'm running the game is how do I kick off the scene? So sometimes just writing myself like a little blurb of like scene setting really helpful when I'm like, oh, like as the last of the sun smears the sky in purple hues, you roll into town and you find Pearl garbed and practical, but fashionable traffic flows in need of breaking in. And then she has the one line of dialogue I've given her. And she meets up with you and it's like, I'm glad you came, I'm glad to see you. Are we ready to get going? I do have one question. Like, are these boots always so uncomfortable and heavy, and you wear these like all the time? Because, again, sort of like reforming that. Like, this is a character that is used to a much softer lifestyle in that way. Harder in other ways, but softer as far as sort of like physical exertion and moving around and doing that sort of stuff. Like out and about adventuring kind of stuff. So just doing that and giving them an opportunity to have some sort of this moment where they have a little bit of a social RP before we're just like, and then you're moving on to the next place. So just give them a little thing and then show the passage of time, another hour of travel, lots of twilight, please. You're arriving on Dabagora in the glow of your torch and lantern light, reminding myself and my players narratively like through the description to be like, oh right, we need light sources. So yeah, we have the Nyx thing. I didn't leave anything for Nyx because I knew Nyx was just going to be, her dialogue was going to be so simple. There was also this scene dressing that I did not use. I completely skipped over and forgot about it. Is to have the big wheels. These are real things where I try to like mix in real world stuff. So this real thing, they're like big, like imagine a water wheel kind of, but imagine it's got a whole like this spiral of tubing. And so basically how it works is that you use one end and it's sort of like a reverse water wheel. So rather than having the wheel being driven by the current of a river, you physically move the wheel and it scoops up water. And then it goes around the spiral because as it continues to go in that direction, it comes out through an output on the other side. And so they're using these big wheels that they like mechanically move, like have people like move the wheels, or maybe they use some sort of beast of burden to help keep the wheels moving. And then it scoops up all the water and is dumping all this water out of the polder to create it. It's just a bit of world building and something that I knew and I wanted to throw in for flair, and then completely forgot to talk about. It was not important in the moment, so we just skipped over it. Yeah, so that's one of the things that is important. I didn't do it with this adventure, though I was definitely mindful of the time. I'm always very mindful when I'm running the game, and sometimes when I run an adventure like this, in addition to having like the DCs, I do scene DCs. We've talked about this before. If you don't know what that's about, it's like a one-room DC. It's be like anything that you're going to try to do in the scene is probably going to be DC 16. If it feels like it should be simpler than DC 16, it's DC 13. If it feels like DC 16 is maybe a little bit too easy for what you're trying to do, so it should be a little bit more challenging, we'll do DC 19, so plus or minus 3 off of whatever that is. But it kind of gives you an idea of, scene by scene, how difficult things are to do. It's just a fast way to do DCs, instead of trying to come up with a handful of them every scene. Just going with one and stick with it. But in addition to that, sometimes what I will do, like if I'm running a one-shot, I'll put the hour marks, I'll put time marks on it. So it might be like, okay, this is, we start at 6 o'clock and we finish at 11 o'clock. So I know that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 5 hours, I got 5 scenes. So I know that, so then that gives me an idea of when each scene needs to start. So when I'm looking at the clock and I'd be like, okay, this is, this is hour 1, hour 2, hour 3. By hour 3, they should be here. So that's what we say, 7, 8, 9. So by 9 p.m. or whatever, they should be here. It's 9 p.m. here. So that helps me, like when I'm running the game, and I look down and be like, okay, I'm behind schedule. What can I cut to make things kind of catch up? Because I want to make sure that I try not to go over too often. I did this time because we, like I said, basically added an extra fight I didn't plan for. But usually that's what I do. So I might go, okay, well, let's say that it's time, I'm about to run Attack of the Sturges. We've just finished Twilight Travels. We've finished the scene. I'm looking at and take a look at the time. Time is 9:15. I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit behind. How can I cut a little bit? So in this one, I might be like, actually, I'm going to cut this part. There's not going to be any Sturge reinforcements. It's just going to be the one swarm. Just make things go a little bit faster. And if I need to, I might cut some of the hit points out of it. Or once it feels like, oh, these guys have it under a handle, I'll just bring combat to it and be like, oh, you kill it, or it runs away, or whatever. And we'll cut that time, and we'll get that time back. Because one of the things that we want to do, and this is a Sly Flourish tip, we brought up Sly Flourish earlier, is when you're cutting an adventure, like while you're running it, don't cut from the end. Otherwise, you'll end up with a whole bunch of unfinished adventures you're trying to run. You always want to finish the adventure, so you want to cut from the middle. So you might be, if we were running this adventure and I was like way behind, let's say instead of 9 p.m. it was, I'm gonna go ahead and take this out, but instead of 9:15 p.m. maybe it's 10 o'clock, and I'm like, oh, 10 o'clock, I'm supposed to be down here finding tunnels. I might cut this entire scene. I might be like, oh, I'm not doing the searches. Or I'm like, oh, well, because then if I cut find the tunnels, I'll have 2 combats back to back, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does make the end of an adventure very, very heavy and very, very slow if you kind of sluggy if you go from one combat immediately into a different one. Whereas it might be a little bit easier, especially if you're trying to cut time. Combat is the thing that takes the longest in D&D, at least contemporary D&D, because you know when you're pulling up a fight like this, you're staring down the barrel of at least 45 minutes on the table to get this probably done. I'm like, maybe I'll just have them go straight to find the puzzle. Or maybe I'll give them the idea, and maybe instead of making this combat, maybe this is now a exploration thing to avoid. Or we talk about, oh, this is blanket swarm of searches. So instead of like a mechanical swarm, it's like a tide of searches, like a plague of locusts kind of situation. And be like, there's so many searches, you can't possibly fight these. Like, you need to hide from them. And maybe we run some little thing where it's like, oh, well, I climb up in the trees, or oh, maybe we dive in the mud, or I cast fog clouds so they can't see, and then so we can let them pass over it because it won't fly into the fog cloud, or however they want to get around it. I just pivot and do something slightly different, trying to keep the essence of what I was trying to do. It's like, oh, what I was trying to do is be like, oh, the Sturge problem that you guys didn't deal with a dozen sessions ago. Yeah, that's still like here, and it's still a problem, and it's growing. It's a growing problem, and it's far-ranging from where it used to be. So those sorts of situations. But yeah, I think that's everything we really probably need to talk about this one. Not anything else going on. Oh, one thing I did have to improvise in the scene is I said at the beginning, after we did the appeal, before they left to meet Pearl on the East Road at sunset, I was like, oh, there is the opportunity for you guys to like do some shopping or pick up some supplies. We had one of our players, our cleric, run to go pick up a potion. So went to the apothecary, and I was like, okay. He's like, how much is a potion? It's like, okay, well, a potion standard is 50 gold. And he's like, ugh, that's really expensive. I'm like, yes, it is. Go ahead and roll me a persuasion check. Rolled a persuasion check and rolled. I don't think it was a natural one, but it was very low. I know that. Couldn't have been more than a 7. And I was like, all right, well, you guys have an NPC, a friendly NPC who works at the apothecary shop. Isn't the apothecary, but it's like an assistant right now. And it's like, you have to tell me like how you screw up getting the friends and family discount to make it a little bit cheaper. And so it's like, oh, I fumble over it, or I say something that's unintentionally rude to the NPC or whatever it is. Gives the ability for the kind of push it back on the player. And it's like, you tell me how you screw this up. I don't know how you screw it up. Because this should be a no-brainer. You go and talk to your friends, and then you fumbled something in this interaction. And then it's like, all right. But I also was like, I wanted them to have the healing if they needed the healing. So I was like, okay, what he's going to do is he's going to do you a solid. He'll give you a 2-for-1 deal. He's got these expired health potions, which is something that in the other campaign I play in that we're dealing with. Well, we're not dealing with it. We're dealing with people who dealt with it. And dealing with that, which was a fully like a random encounter thing that we came across in that maritime campaign, is we found a dinghy adrift with, I think, 4 people in it who were all laughing hysterically, and realized that they had contracted cackle fever and had been set adrift from the ship that they were on, so they didn't infect anybody else. And so we told them, like, we got good enough on our medicine checks to understand what the disease is and how it works. And then it was going to pass, but we didn't. It's highly infectious, so we don't want them in contact with anybody. So we just kind of pulled their dinghy behind our ship. Let it troll behind us. So we're not doing anything until they stop laughing. But I was like, the way you get cackle fever, which is it's not something I kept in my brain, is from using expired potions. It is one of the effects that can happen if you drink expired potions. So I was like, oh, well, now this is in my head. We keep everything as Dungeon Master or Game Master. You log everything in your little mind filing cabinet, your mind palace, and be like, when there's an opportunity, you pull it back out and drop it into your game from the wondrous many sources that is the tableau of life. Other games, other stuff in the real world, like I said, the big wheels, which is a historical thing that I know of. Not even historical, they still use them today, and where they use it to sort of like bilge water out of places and stuff like that. So all those kind of things, and you just pepper your game with it. So I did that, and so I brought Cackle Fever back in. So he bought a couple of potions that could be dodgy, and was warned, hey, these are past expired, but you can have two for the price of one. So they took the deal. That cleric did indeed, as he was knocked out, get fed one of those potions, and indeed did fail the Constitution saving throw, and now for sure has Cackle Fever. And as does, we're going to have to figure out probably the rest of the party, because everybody else is around him too. So they're all going to have to make their saves as well. So we'll see. But yeah, so that was the thing that I fully needed to improvise when they were like, "Oh, I need a potion." Okay, well here we're gonna do some improvisation real quick to get you what you need for it in a hopefully narratively fiction fulfilled kind of way. But yeah, that's everything. That's my thoughts about changes to maybe homebrewing, some differences in the help action. We talked about exiting a PC. I did it with a one-shot. I think that's a really great way to do it. It's not a off by itself one-shot. It's one-shot that's very much in the fiction of the world. I think you could do it with something like the Wild Sheep Chase. I'll bring that back up, which is a published one-shot. I just didn't really have the time to take something like that and mold it the way that I wanted to. I felt like I was going to spend as much time changing up things with red marker in this particular adventure to make it fit within my world, in the context of my world, than it would for me to create my own adventure. And so I ended up making my own adventure. So I did that instead. But obviously this was the jumping off point, is that Wild Sheep Chase, and be like, oh, I can do something Animal Fiend. We have an animal in the campaign that the players are familiar with, and have that. So we did that. Exiting a player out was very left it in a way that was, I think, ambivalent enough that it was like, oh, he's definitely not around. But at the same time was like, if that player wanted to come back in and play this character again, they could do that. If they wanted to come in and play a different character, that would be equally as fine. So that was what I was trying to do, and I think we got mission accomplished here. So, pat on the back for myself. I think I did a good job here. Thanks to my players who put up with these shenanigans and had their fun, and got to kill one of their own party members in the end. Or did they? They got their to be continued next time. So everyone's out there in the darkness waiting for you all. Yeah, that's it. Nothing else to talk about here. Thanks for hanging out, guys. This was a fun one. This was fun. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and then I sat down and I was like, yeah, I should definitely just talk about the situation I've got in my game. I think that's a situation a lot of DMs come up to, and like, how do you exit the player? I mean, luckily for me, I had a couple of weeks heads up. We knew that this person's schedule was going to change, so that gave me the ability to percolate on it a little bit. I should have. I didn't really do that, unfortunately. Like I said, other aspects of my life a little crazy right now. So I didn't really have a chance to noodle on it as much as I would have liked. But came up with an adventure. This is a good way to spend the rubric I used, that sort of 3-2-1 method for setting up an adventure. Made it nice and easy. Only gave myself the notes that I need. No more, no less. Have my own other resources in my DM binder. I haven't pulled it out. It's still in my bag. So I knew that I had some other improvisation aids, some things like a GM Oracle. If somebody asks for like why something's happening and you're like, I don't know, you can roll on something like a D100 GM Oracle, and it'll kind of give you some ideas and sort of stuff. If you need some hazards or set dressing, those are sort of things I keep. NPC names, all that sort of stuff. Great improvisation aids. Again, I think that golden rule of prep is you want to prep everything you're not prepared to improv. to kind of make up on the spot, and then give yourself tools to be successful when you do need to make up stuff on the spot. And once you do that, you realize that you can really, really cut down on the stuff you need to prep. So this is very, even for a session prep, this is more than, right now I'm really kind of prepping per session. So this, about a page front and back, is pretty close to what I prep for a session, for about a 4-hour session. That's really all I need. Now, sometimes I make the prep and then the players take a left turn and we don't do anything like that. That happened very recently when they got in trouble with Charles Rowell, and everything went very sideways as Charles Rowell was trying to arrest one or more player characters. So everything took a very hard left turn in the session. And that happens too, but I know enough about the setting, I know about the NPC, I know kind of what's going on in the background. But once you have that, you'll feel confident enough as you grow up being a Dungeon Master, Game Master, you'll feel confident enough to be like, yeah, I can handle this. They could maybe get pulled off to jail, I know what that is. They could maybe get fined, I could come up with a fine for them, or community service, or whatever it is. I can, other sorts of stuff, maybe that, and I don't need to come up with a way to trick them. I can come up with things like, I'm staring at it. Stop right now. This, which I'm sure you guys can't see very well. I'm gonna have to move this camera. This is not gonna work for me. I know that I'm upset the entire time, and I don't love it. I know you guys can't really see this very well. It's a map of the temple. It's like I need to sketch a map of the temple because that's where they're all cloistered in there. As Charles Rogel tries to get to the bottom of this and get them arrested. Junior detective Charles Rogel, amateur PI. Yeah, that's it. And so that's a big thing about prep, is prepping to prepare yourself to handle whatever your players are going to throw at you. And you don't do that. I think, especially for new DMs, the thought is, to do that, to be prepared for any situation, I need to have hard facts about everything. But what you actually need instead is actually soft facts about things. You need leanings and tendencies. You need things that are going to help that connective tissue. Because if you try to iron out everything in the setting or everything that could possibly happen in your game world, everything's incredibly rigid. And what you really need is a lot of flexibility. So actually, it's actually helpful to have a lot of questions that you kind of maybe have a potential answer to, but also you don't iron out, so it has to be the answer. Yeah, I don't know if that explains that very well, what I'm trying to say. Which is essentially like the gaps in your prep, you not knowing stuff is actually a strength rather than a weakness of your prep. Oftentimes, not knowing things gives you the ability to make up things on the spot. Gives you the ability, logistically, to improvise. Like, you can make stuff up and then have places to put it into the game and feel like, okay, yeah, no, I didn't have anything for here. This works perfectly fine. This is where it would be. Where do you pull for dungeon puzzles? So dungeon puzzles are not a thing that I generally improvise on. I think, and I'm on the channel, and I've said this a number of times, I'm not a particular huge fan of puzzles for dungeons in general, just because, we can go over it very quickly. So the issues I generally have with puzzles is that, first of all, puzzles generally have a solution. If you have a problem with only one solution, everybody has to get to that solution. Whereas I like to run more obstacles, like, here's a thing that's in your way. I don't care how you get past it. That's your job as the players. You guys, I'm not doing your work, but here's the thing that's in your way. You tell me how you're going to deal with it. There's a situation like in this last standoff with Pearl and the five people. They could have come out and tried to, like, maybe intimidate these guys to stand down with a show of force, maybe do something like that. There are other ways. It didn't have to be a fight. I knew it was probably going to be a fight, but it didn't have to be a fight. If they decided to get up here and then they start talking to people, it would be a tense standoff. They would for sure be holding Clovis ransom, that sort of thing. So I try not to make, and I think the puzzles have solutions, which is one of the reasons I don't do a lot of puzzles. Also, like, my experience with puzzles, both as a dungeon master and a player, is that I find them generally unfulfilling. Because in general, I feel like two things are usually what happen in most puzzles. In the first situation, somebody is familiar with this puzzle or the type of puzzle and almost solves it immediately. This actually comes up very quickly because I would throw things like cryptograms into that ring as well as a puzzle. That happens very in the latest season at time of recording this, anyways, of Cloudward Ho, which is the current campaign for Dimension 20. Siobhan Thompson immediately solves a cryptogram like at the table while they're playing. Brendan wanted that to be like a multi-episode thing that they figured out, and she's like sits down and solves it in maybe half an hour. She just kind of locks in and just figures it out because she has a background where she knows some stuff about ciphers and cryptograms. So she just solves it, and it's like, okay, so then that's happened. So that's not super filling. Like, it's fun. That was fun for them in the moment. But if you're planning this as an encounter that's going to take, half an hour to an hour as they try to figure this out, and so they can have some interactions with NPCs and stuff like that, and somebody's like, oh yeah, this one, and then that one, and that one. And you're like, yep, that's it. You got it. And your hour-long scene is 5 minutes. And then you're like, and now how do I make up 55 minutes somewhere else in the play session? So that's one of the issues, is when you have a challenge that just kind of gets hand-waved away. And the other one is the exact opposite of that, is that, and I think we've all had this situation as Dungeon Masters where you're like, they pull out the sometimes you'll see it in like memes and things like that, the brain teasers for babies and stuff like that, like just to make a very simple puzzle, a very simple brain teaser thing like that. And then your players will just like not be able to solve it. And you're like, it's so simple. And it's like, of course it's simple for us because we know the answer already when we're going into it. We don't have to figure out the answer. We know the answer. So that becomes really hard to do with puzzles. And you're like, okay, so then what happens is you let them spin their wheels for a while. It ends up taking longer than you want it to. And in the end, you kind of have them just make skill checks, and then you kind of give them enough hints to the point where you're essentially just solving it for them. So that's sort of my issues with puzzles, is that more often than not, it ends in one of those two ways. Either somebody immediately solves it, or the players can't solve it until you give them so much help that you pretty much just solve it for them. And unfortunately, I think it's sort of like an inverted bell curve. It's like most of the time one of those two situations happen, and very rarely is it like they piece by piece figure out the clues and put the puzzle together, and in 20 minutes they're always making progress in it and feel like they're making headway. I think that's really, really difficult to do. I think it's extremely difficult to do, and that's so much of that is dependent on the specific people who are playing at your table and knowing how good they are at puzzles, how knowledgeable they are at puzzles, and a lot of times just their attention span. Because sometimes puzzles are really hard for people who have attention span problems. They'll just like clock out. And then you have like one or two people, so now you only have half the players working on it. These are all reasons why I don't work with puzzles. So where do I pull from puzzles? To answer the original question, if I'm going to put a puzzle in it, it's usually something I already know. I prefer to do things like, if we remember going back to here, I'll just pull it up. Yes, I've got it. Let me pull this out because I got to go look for it for a second. I think it's right in here though. Here we go. Yeah, Brendan Lee Mulligan is used to critical successes derailing him on a regular basis. Such as Allie Beardsley. Absolutely. Yeah, it happens. And you roll with those punches, for sure. And it does make you have to toss things out. But that guy is also one of the things you have to remember with shows like this is that, first of all, Brendan's been running the game for longer than even I have, and I've been running the game for a while. But he's been running it since he was like 9 years old. So he's very, very good at doing it. B, he's a professional improviser already who's like trained to do it and deal with it. And 3, we don't see them, but there's an entire flotilla of people who are helping because it's a show. There's lore keepers. There are people who made all those classes for the for the newest campaign. They hand-made a whole bunch of homebrew classes. There's literally a team that helps him deal with this stuff and put this stuff together. You are a person trying to run like a weekly session. Like, you cannot compare yourself to an entire production team. Like, that's incredibly unreasonable for everybody involved. Let's go back to it. Here we go. So Golden Groth. So this was a adventure I ran a little bit ago. This is the last adventure I ran for them, and the thing that's kind of like a puzzle is, where is it at? Gods in Stone. So this is the opening area of the dungeon. They go into the dungeon, and they're like, okay, it's an 80-foot square chapel. Far in, there's a dais, an alcove, and a catenary arch. That's just for me to know. Like, I can tell you what kind of arch it is that leads to a different area that I don't tell them. On the left and right walls, and alternating darkened brazier niches and carved figure buttresses depicting the divine pantheon. 4 on the right, 3 on the left. In the middle, there's another catenary arch. And so this looks like a puzzle, but really it's just a trap. And the only thing that's puzzling about it is that you can turn the trap off, and you do that by lighting all the braziers. So it looks like it's a puzzle, but you can literally just run right through it and not deal with it. And it's not blocking the doorways or anything. They're open doorways. You can just run through them. You don't have to do anything with them. And the idea with this trap is, like, the longer you stay in this room, the worse it gets for you. You actually don't want to be in this room because you get hit with these golden eye beams. So, which will slow you, then they restrain you, then they incapacitate you, and you begin dying as you get covered in a patina of gold. This is one of the things where I was very much going off of the golden Bond girls. I don't know why that jumped to my mind, why that was top of mind for me, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a cool thing, I'll throw that in this. This will be a cool thing. It'll be like, oh, what a neat little sort of karmic kind of justice to be like, if somebody's coming in here to steal gold from us, or thieves are coming into our lair, having them being killed by gold, the thing that they're trying to get out of here, seems very fulfilling. So that's sort of the idea. And I was like, oh, right, the gold Bond girls, and that made me think of, oh, there was always the rumor that, like, oh, one of the Bond girls died from the paint because her skin couldn't breathe. 100% false myth. And I'm like, well, but in a fantasy world, why not? Be like, yeah, this thing absolutely suffocate you and overheat because you're covered in literal gold. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff I tend to do instead of puzzles. Just because I don't, for the reasons I've already stated why I don't use puzzles. I just think they have too many problems trying to integrate them. But, that is one person's opinion. There are tons of people who love puzzles. They love playing games with puzzles, and they love running puzzles. I'm just not that person. So, I'm not your guy, fortunately. You have to talk to somebody else about that. I'm sure somebody else will have much better puzzle advice than me. Because my advice is just like, I avoid them. If I find them in the module, sometimes I'll just replace them, or give them some other way to get through it. Or, like I said, you have to have a... one of the things I will do for something like a puzzle or a magic door or something like that, or a riddle or something, is you want a pressure release valve. You want some other way, because you don't want it to become a dead end. So one of the things I'll do is, like, oh, if there's let's say there's like a door with a magic mouth thing on it, enchantment on it, and it only unlocks if you answer its riddle, right? It tells you a riddle, and then you have to answer the riddle, and if you answer the riddle, it lets you through. Classic dungeon chicanery puzzle kind of stuff. Like, okay, if you're going to do that and they have to get through that door, you either have to let them break it down, which now the door's enchanted, so usually magic items are kind of hard to break, and they may or may not have access to dispel magic to just get rid of it. So you have to provide some other way. How else can they get through that? It's like, oh, well, I will put the answer to the riddle in a scrap of paper in another monster's pocket somewhere in the dungeon. So if they're like, oh, we can't get through here, maybe we can find a clue somewhere else. I don't want them to spend a whole bunch of time here. If they haven't explored everything else, they can go fight those monsters, kill them. Hey, here's a piece of paper that's got, let's say the answer was chicken on it. A piece of paper that says chicken. And usually at that point they'll be like, oh, that's probably the answer to the puzzle. That's the answer to the riddle. Chicken. Interesting. And then they can go back to the door and be like, stand in front of the magic mouth and it says it's, whatever its riddle is that the answer is chicken to. And then the players can go, chicken! And they'll be like, yes, that is the correct answer. And the door opens. Another similar thing you could do, that's the main pressure release valve. It's giving them an ability to either, in an alternate way, get through it. If you're making, ideally you want to make loops in your dungeon, so they shouldn't have to go through that door to get to any specific area. There should be at least one other path for them to get to that same area. So it's not a stone wall for them. I was going to say something else. What else was I going to say? Yeah, you need some other way for them to get through. Some way, when you do something like a puzzle, which can be a hard stop, you need to provide some other way for them to basically, if it's a choke point or something like that, in the dungeon or adventure or whatever it is, where they have to solve this to move forward. Ideally, you don't want that to be the case. In really, really good adventure design or dungeon design, you want to make sure that there's no single point of failure within the dungeon that's going to make the rest of the adventure unplayable. Like, oh, if you can't get through the magic mouth door, you just can't do the rest of the adventure. And so we're going to sit here for hours, for an hour, let's say an hour plus, and it kind of depends on the group, knocking their heads against the wall trying to come up with the answer of chicken. Or, so it takes too long, and then you have to keep giving them hints, and then eventually you're just like, the answer's chicken. Oh, okay. We say chicken. The door opens. Great. That was a fun encounter. Or somebody listens to the riddle and they're like, oh, I've heard this before. The answer's chicken. Neither of those, I think, are particularly fun play experiences. But you want to make sure that at least one of those two happens. I think the easiest way to avoid, certainly the former, the one where people just kind of get stuck, is to have some other way for them to be able to get through if they can't get the answer right. Oh yeah, no, you're welcome. You've had the issue where a solved puzzle requires some help, which is the end left one of the players unsatisfied since they didn't like the puzzle's logic. Yeah, sometimes, and that's a thing that comes up, I think, very often in D&D riddles, where people are like, I think I had this happen to me, and I've also heard similar circumstances from other people. Be like, have a riddle and be like, oh, and we're listening to it, and it's like about falling and slowly and stuff like that. That's sort of the clues. And so we're like, oh, it's a feather. And the DM's like, no. And they're like, well, that's weird because a feather works for every single piece of this riddle. And then in the end, we find out that, oh, it's actually supposed to be a leaf, like a leaf falling from a tree. It's like, so it's described as a leaf falling from a tree. And you're like, yeah, but the feather does the same thing as a leaf. And it falls from a tree. So either one of those would have been a viable solution. But yeah. Alright. And before we go down another rabbit trail, I'm going to go ahead and end it. So that's it for this one. Thanks you guys for coming and watching. If you like everything, hit the like button. There's the website, reddragonking.com. Yell at me about stuff on Twitter and /X, and maybe I'll check it. I'm really bad at that. Share this with friends. That's the best thing you could do. If you like this channel, you want to see other stuff like it, is get more eyeballs on it. That's always helpful. So thanks for that. We have the coffee link if you want to throw me $1 or $2 or whatever. You can check that out. It's in the description. Otherwise, that's it for me. Thanks for hanging out, guys. I'll see you next time. All right? Bye-bye.